Okay, good evening. It's 6:34. I'm Harry Fisher. I'm the chairman of the Board of Estimate. I'm going to call the regular meeting of May 19th to order. If everyone would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, I didn't bring up my agenda. Okay, we're going to start with a non-routine item, which is CC. Ms. Vasiliotis.
Can I make a motion to add to the agenda to approve the Scrivener errors for the resolutions that were approved by the RTM?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion been made by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Ms. Tarkington to add an item to approve the adjustments that were Scrivener's errors to the resolutions. Is there any objection to that being adopted unanimously? Seeing none, we will take that up later in the meeting. Okay, the first.
I'd like to make a comment, please.
Okay,
I wanted to say that I had intended to make a motion tonight to add an item to the agenda for an increase for the Board of Education funding. This motion was a response to published statement from 3 BET members that they were supportive of additional funding for the Board of Ed.
Excuse me, but this
I
is
have to say, I am making a comment. I have to say that it's
Chairman, point of order.
unfortunate, to put
I'm
it
sorry,
mildly,
but you
that they
don't have the
waited
floor.
so long to indicate that they
don't have
now
the
wanted
floor.
to change their vote.
Ms. Moriarty, please defer.
I am explaining why this motion is not being made, though I made the comment.
You can
The
explain
law
it.
departments
There is no-
indicated that the motion would not be in legal order, so the BET
You're
is not
commanding the
able
floor
to
and you're
debate
out of
and then
order.
vote.
Please. Okay, the first item is a non-routine application, CC3, from the Conservation Department. If we could hear from that, and just for everybody's information, we're trying to get Zoom to work. So Mr. Deschamps and Mr. Kalb could be on it, but we're having trouble. That's why the music.
Yeah, you need to turn the volume. It's very distracting.
The meeting has not yet started. Please try again later. Goodbye.
Okay, it solved that one.
Okay. All right, your presentation, please.
Good evening, Sarah Cocaro, Assistant Director of Environmental Affairs. I'm joined with Jim Michael, who's the Commissioner of DPW. I'm here tonight to ask the BET to appropriate funds that we received from a grant from the state. Before I start, I just want to say that June will be the 5-year anniversary of the town's municipal food scrap recycling program that has been taking place at Holly Hill Resource Recovery Facility, which was a collaboration between the Greenwich Recycling Advisory Board, GRAB, Waste Free Greenwich, Greenwich Green and Clean, and the town. This voluntary food scrap recycling program was established to divert food scraps from our municipal solid waste stream and address its waste management challenges. In response to community feedback, since then, 2 additional satellite drop-off sites were established to increase convenience and accessibility to the program. In June 2021, collections started at the Old Greenwich Farmers Market at Living Hope Community Church. And in January 2022, another collection location was provided at Round Hill Community Church. Both sites have been successfully managed by community volunteers. Since the summer of 2020, the community has diverted over 600,000 pounds or 300 tons of organic matter from the waste stream. Every year, tonnages collected have increased, but they continue to be a fraction of the potential food residual that could be captured and diverted from the waste stream. Diversion of food scraps is a low-hanging fruit, a promising solution to Connecticut's waste crisis, as wasted food makes up over 22% of the waste stream. So participation in Greenwich's food scrap recycling program has been growing slowly but steadily. There were a survey that was done, and those that did participate in the food scrap program already noted that the drop-off sites were inconvenient, and the times of the drop-off were very limiting. More than half that did participate noted that the hours were difficult to meet. So the 2 satellite drop-off stations are only 1 day a week for a few hours. Other barriers cited include this difficulty of parking at the satellite drop-off sites, unaffordability or lack of Holly Hill permit, heavy traffic at the transfer station, or the use of backyard composting. So in light of this feedback, the town of Greenwich applied for and was awarded $15,892 for 3 smart food collection bins through Connecticut Deep's inaugural Materials Management Infrastructure, or MMI, grant program. The MMI program is a grant to municipalities and regional entities to develop small to medium-scale waste management infrastructure. The state aims to fund innovative and impactful solid waste management infrastructure projects to advance progress towards a statewide 60% diversion rate. Competition was very strong for this grant. There were 20 applications for over $30 million. Greenwich was one of only 9 municipalities to receive this. So using the 3 smart food collection bins, the town of Greenwich aims to broaden food scrap diversion efforts with the introduction of 2 public drop-off stations. Building off the success of the voluntary food scrap recycling program, this initiative gives residents expanded access to secure, durable collection units for convenient and easy food waste disposal. The program is designed to be a cost-effective alternative to curbside pickup, offering a scalable solution that addresses the growing waste crisis while supporting more sustainable habits. By starting these 2 strategically placed drop-off locations, the town aims to boost participation, reduce municipal solid waste, and evaluate program success for future expansion. Committee members at the budget meeting had asked about more specific parameters, and I do want to just go over those quickly. The diversion of an additional 60 tons annually, as measured by the hauler and web-based portal. Engagement of at least 150 households as tracked by the app, which is currently double the number of households that participate in the old Greenwich food scrap drop-off location. Cutting tipping fees up to $7,000 based on the volume of the collection bins and the number of pickups per week. Increase accessibility and ease of drop-off as assessed by a follow-up survey, and raise awareness about the waste crisis and the importance of waste reduction as measured by the number of attendees at a community outreach events and systems training. As with the current program, residents separate and collect food scraps and other accepted organic material at home. The collected material is brought to a drop-off station and deposited into a smart bin. Registered users download a free app which enables them to locate available units and unlock them. The hauler will pick up the material 2 to 3 times a week and transport it to a licensed processing facility. A web-based management system tracks participation and use on a bin-by-bin basis to provide data reporting such as use patterns and volume collected. The hauler will provide additional data on tonnages diverted. The Conservation Department, with support from Waste Free Greenwich, will monitor the use for cleanliness, maintain collection stations, analyze the data, and conduct training and education outreach, including information sessions, on-site training, and outreach materials. There were concerns at the Budget Committee meeting about contamination, misuse, illegal dumping, and additional measures that will be put in place to ensure proper use and cleanliness. I want to mention that the bins are reinforced heavy-duty units that are fully enclosed and inaccessible to pests. Odors are contained so animals are not drawn to the stations, unlike open trash and recycling bins. The unit door lock out automatically and stay locked to prevent unauthorized access and contamination, and only registered users can use the app to unlock and open the unit. There's a foot pedal that allows for a touch-free recycling, so residents have full use of their hands to place the food scraps into the bins. And most participants use specialized storage bags that limit any spillages from their food scraps. Our experience at the satellite sites the last 4 years is that participants are careful and mindful when dropping off, and we have every expectation that the same practices will be applied to the smart bins. The app controls for use by tracking users' access and creating a timestamp of access, allowing for conservation staff as program administrators to counter any problems. Participants can even report issues through the app. The smart bins will be located adjacent to trash and recycling bins to prevent litter. It would be highly unusual for anyone to leave trash behind when a trash or recycling bin is nearby. The units are also discreetly located in low traffic areas of the park, So participants will need to be intentional when they're doing drop-off. This way, their locations will hopefully deter littering. The hauler will frequently monitor their bins during their pickups twice or 3 times a week, and conservation staff with Waste Free Greenwich volunteers will also conduct weekly checks on the units. Further, Parks and Rec staff can keep an eye out, especially at the Binney Park, as their operations building is a few steps from the units. A fill sensor inside measures the bin fullness, preventing overflowing, and informs the contracted hauler where and when collections are needed. And finally, the app is a vehicle to provide educational information and contact users in case there are any issues. It's a way to reinforce the outreach that the town and Waste Free Greenwich will do to educate the community and train program participants. All of these controls, the heavy-duty construction, the locking mechanism, controlled access, strategic placement, technical features, education efforts, and consistent monitoring will be in place to reduce the risk of littering, contamination, and other misuse. We have selected 2 sites based on feedback from the Parks and Rec Department as well as the First Selectman. The locations are in Binney Park and Coscob Park. So we're using the MMI grant to cover the capital infrastructure costs associated with the project, including the smart bins, the concrete pad, the installation of the units, the freight, the apps to go along. The Department of Public Works will cover the operation cost of hauling. We've well-researched this project. We've consulted 2 licensed organic hauling companies, Curbside Compost and Blue Earth, both of who currently work for the town. The 2 smart bin companies, Metro Store and Big Belly. We've talked to Deep. We also reached out to our community, other communities such as Manchester and West Hartford who have similar programs. And the program was really developed in response to community feedback from the survey that was answered by 170 residents. Over 20 locations were thoroughly evaluated, and the final selection made in consultation with Parks and Rec. We're asking the Budget Committee to appropriate the grant funds for this project in order to strengthen our town's waste management infrastructure and divert vulnerable compostable material from disposal, helping to create a more predictable, sustainable, and cost-effective waste management system for our town and taxpayers in the coming years. At the Law Committee meeting, there was a question about if the other entities in town, such as grocery stores, resorts, conference centers, institutions that are now going to have to apply with a new law that passed in January of 2025, where if they generate more than 26 tons of source separated organic material, they have to comply with this and do food diversion efforts. There were concerns that these entities would use these smart bins. However, they're required to submit annual reports to DEEP, which include a summary of its amount of donated edible food, food scraps recycled, and organics recyclers and associated collections used. So the town will have the ability to track usage of the units through the app and the web-based portal to prevent abuse. I did want to acknowledge the Board of Selectmen for their help and feedback in this, as well as the State Representative Hector Arzano, Steve Meskers, and Rachel Khanna, as well as letters from Waste Free Greenwich and DPW. When we did visit the Law Committee, they did look at if this project falls within the Conservation Committee Budget Resolution number 19, and they voted 2-0-0 on that. So I'm here to answer any questions, as well as Jim Michael. And thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a report of the Budget Committee, please?
Yes, normally this report would be given prior to the applicant. So it was reported that the town applied for and was awarded a grant through the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection under the Municipal Materials Management Infrastructure, MMI, grant program for the capital required to purchase 3 food scrap bins to be placed in 2 park locations. In terms of the MMI program, Greenwich was one of 9 municipalities selected to receive the funding. The grant aims to strengthen the town's waste management infrastructure. We were told that. A member commented that the operating costs for which a separate RFP will be issued should have a separate appropriation, and requested that that be done. The committee voted 3-0-1 for the project, and the item was made non-routine.
Do you want to report on the law committee?
Yeah, the Law Committee was just asked to look at the resolutions with respect to the Conservation Commission and whether or not this program fell within the resolution. And because it was a broad resolution that includes environmental projects, the Law Committee agreed that the resolution covers this program. So it just requires BET approval and not RTM approval as well. I'm sorry, and we voted 2-0-0.
Okay, would someone like to move this forward? I will move it. Mr. Self moves. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Alfano seconds.
I have a question,
Comments,
or
Ms.
I want to
Moriarty?
ask for a clarification from Ms. Tarkington through the chair. You made a comment about a separate,
Yes,
Appropriate.
at the Budget Committee, because I don't think people understand that this grant only covers, at the Budget Committee I made that. I don't think people understand that the grant covers only the capital costs, as Sarah has just told us. There's also an additional, in the paperwork explained to us, there's an additional RFP required for the annual operations costs, the hauler, to visit the site 2 to 3 times a week, et cetera.
and I think you implied that there was a request for a separate appropriation, or.
I did ask for
I-
that in the
I
meeting.
did. So I just want to clarify that a single member of the Budget Committee asked for that, but for $16,000 annually, it's really, was deemed unnecessary, certainly by me.
Right, and the vote, as I explained, was 3-0-1.
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Johnson?
I wasn't ready for a vote. I had some questions. I am the BET liaison, hello, for Department of Public Works, and I was very familiar with this application prior to you sending it in, and I had a series of questions related to it. And I thank you for providing some of the metrics that were of interest to what are the goals with the program and costs. I would appreciate if that were in writing, because the grant did have a lot of discussion about the current. So you have 82 tons at Old Greenwich, for example. So what will be the end result with the increase? I also noticed in the grant application, the timeline that's described is greatly missed. What do you see as the duration of the start and the end point of this pilot?
Right, so thank you for your questions. We're supposed to hear, I believe it was, we're supposed to hear in January if we got the grant, but it ended up being April, so that pushed us back a few months. So as soon as we have your appropriations confirmed, we can issue the RFPs for the bins, so that we would have to follow town policy on how long those RFPs are out. And then depending on, I'm expecting 2 companies to apply since there are only 2 that make these smart bins, but the selection it'll essentially go on track as soon as we can, the timeline will just be shifted 3 months down, so.
Okay, so just a shift out. And you had in the grant that it would be either 2 times or 3 times a weekly pickup, and it sounds like you decided on the 3 times.
I don't think that's been completely decided at this
Oh,
point.
it hasn't been
Yeah.
decided, okay. And is it still going to the facility that's described in the grant, the hauling location? Because that's about an hour and a half away.
So there's New Milford, and there's also Hartford,
Yep.
the West Hartford site. So depending on which hauling company we go with, we'll decide where those go.
Oh, I see, the hauling, okay. Then the, most importantly that I had as a question is the privacy. And when you went to the BET Budget Committee, it actually made me even more concerned because you mentioned enforcement perhaps might be reviewing, because the way to open these smart trash cans is with an app. And an app is free.
Yep.
And what we all know about apps is when it's free, the product is you. So They are going to have a lot of information, and it does sound, to your point, that down to the user level, your drop-off and your trash may be tracked. And so a lot of the questions that I had originally with this grant was, who has access to this data? How much is given? Is there a town policy that's going to be developed around it? Is IT involved in it? And I noticed that third parties are going to be given data as well. It does mention that data is going to be supplied to Waste Free.
So the data that the hauler will get is on the fill sensor inside the bin. So they will only see how full the bin will be, so that will determine if they go 2 or 3 times to pick up. The information on the user will be collected by the conservation department, and it's essentially name, phone number, email address, and address. And we will not be able to know, oh, X user put in this material specifically. It will just be, the hauler will say, when I went to pick up, the past 2 or 3 days had some contamination in it. Can you email all of the users that have used it within the last 2 or 3 days to remind them, please don't put X, Y, and Z into the compost bin?
Thank you. I do think that, to my colleagues, I think this is something that personally, I would like to see a privacy policy developed. I am very sensitive to social media and to public information about myself. And I wouldn't want down to the user level that this information is being given. And as I understand it, any information that you give to the town is FOIable, and then it can be distributed. And for those in the audience who are not aware, I am a weekly food scrapper, and I am very excited with this program. I just think this is not an extension of the current food scrap program. This is a very different program because it's using smart trash can containers. It has this application that's on the front end. On the back end, there's now new cleaning requirements. The battery needs to be replaced. There's a whole new kind of environment to this food scrap program. I'm very enthusiastic for the town to have more drop-off locations. I just think it is a different approach, and I think it needs a description of where we are, where we're going, what we learn, and how we implement this long-term. Thank you.
Ms. Tarkington?
So, Sarah, may I ask a question? Given what Ms. Jansen has said, have you run this by the, requirements, the IT requirements for cybersecurity, et cetera, which I think, well, Ms. Jansen didn't, directly comment on that, but, any of these kind of things now the town is being very concerned about and doing a lot more on that front. So I think, in addition to what she's mentioning, if you haven't done that yet, it should be done.
Ms. Moriarty?
IT's concern is about software loaded onto the town platform that could then cause a virus in the town system.
Well, they're getting
This-
data back.
Data.
They're
Tom is always
getting-
worried about the data.
Right? So
And-
is there an
and-
overlap
and
here?
I was just saying, in general, this is a cloud-based system, so this will, in many of our software programs and stuff that we utilize in Public Works, something like this, once we know the actual vendor, which will come after we go through the RFP process, then they will have to do a cyber security check through IT to make sure that everything's compatible there, and then we'll be able to move forward. This is a pretty low-risk thing for the town because it is all cloud-based. All the information is then just directly submitted back to us. It isn't that they're utilizing our town servers or transmitting through our town system.
Anybody else? Ms. Fascio?
I just, for the two drop-offs that are currently, one was at the church, and I forget where the other one was. Are those smart bins, or are those just drop-offs?
No, those are
Okay.
just bins, yeah.
Ms. Aurora? Ms. Aurora, please.
I have 2 quick questions, and then also just want to follow up on the security. One is, first of all, thank you for doing this. I have a lot of friends that do compost and have mentioned to me, why don't we have more bins. So I'm glad that this is being proposed. I am not a Lucia Jansen yet, where I don't go weekly, but I would like to get more information on how to do this. Just trying to understand, is there, outside of the bins, is there an additional cost to the town? Like, are we using existing employees to help? You mentioned there's going to be additional training, additional information that we're going to be passing out to residents. Is there an additional cost to your department, Jim, or to the town that you foresee, or is it just within the existing manpower that you're going to manage?
It's within our existing department as well as the volunteer groups that we're heavily relying on.
Okay, great. And then what level of adoption do you foresee? Like, for example, are you using a metric that another town has done to say, all right, for a 60,000 population, we foresee we need 100 bins to reach maximum adoption of this program? Where are we looking, right? So now you have 2 and then you have 5. What's a great number to get you to that level of adoption? So what is your current level of adoption? Where are you trying to get to? What is that level that's going to get you there?
So I watched a webinar that the Deep put out about this specific, whether it's Metro Store or Big Belly, and they said that one bin is good for about approximately 100 households. So we have over 22,000 households in Greenwich. But when you think about single-family residences versus Greenwich communities, multifamily housing, you don't necessarily need to, it's not necessarily like one per every, individual houses. But I think we looked at this study, we looked at where people wanted bins. So part of the survey that we did was looking at, if you don't participate in the program, where would you like a bin to be? And so based on those those responses, we selected the Binney Park and the Coscob location. This is a pilot program. We would love to see it expand, obviously, but we also want to make sure that we can do it realistically and sustainably. So I don't have a specific number target. I think right now we're saying if each bin can hold X amount of pounds of food scraps, we're trying to lower the amount of municipal solid waste that's going into our waste stream, but also increasing that diversion percentage that we're getting.
No, I got you. I think the point, and thank you for being honest that you don't exactly know where, what it's going to take to get to where we need to get to. I think it's important to kind of have an understanding. Even pilot programs are great, but you need, at the end, your objective is to maximize your results, right? So, 3 and 5 isn't going to do anything, but it's going to give you a good sense of, are people wanting to do this? And the biggest challenge I see in programs like this is just changing people's habits, right? So usually you need an incentive structure for individuals to say, okay, like recycling only, once you start mandating it, then so I don't think this is something where I hope we don't go down the mandate route, but I think it might be important to look at a model community that is doing it well, where you have, like the number of bins shouldn't really be dependent upon population, but let's say you have 10% of the population buying in on this. That would be great, because I think we'll probably have less than 1% would be my guess now.
We have 7 to 10% participating based on participants at the Old Greenwich, the Round Hill, and then at the Holly Hill site where.
7 to 10% of the Greenwich
Current,
population?
yeah.
So you have
Current.
5,000 or 6,000
Yeah.
people in this town
Yeah.
that you think are probably participating. Well, that's great. So if your objective is to double, triple, I think it'd be great just to have a sense
Yeah,
of where
we
you're
did-
going.
We did put goals in the sheet that was supplied to you all about that,
Okay.
but, yeah.
Great, thank you for all the
Thank
work
you.
on this. Yeah.
Ms. Vasiliotis
Just a
again?
follow-up question. Who's cleaning these things?
So the hauling company is responsible for that.
Oh, sorry, I had one more. I'm sorry, the one question that came to me when Ms. Jansen was speaking is, what's the difference between the smart bins and just what's currently available? Meaning, do we have to collect individual data? Because I'm sure people that are listening in might say, well, maybe now I don't want to do it. I think what happened with the parking, with people that do parking passes in town where, their names were all foilable because somebody wanted to know something. So I think that is going to be a real concern, where if residents have to share their name, their email, their phone number just to participate, it seems like a big ask. Is there a way to do it without having to share that?
The answer would be to still continue with the existing bins that are available, Holly Hill and these 2 satellite drop-off stations. So I think when you look at how many people have smartphones, how many people actually use apps, giving a name, an email address is really not that much information, I feel like, that people are.
No, but the difference is that when I give it to, for example, something that is not a town entity, it's not foiable. If it becomes town of Greenwich property, people can actually request that information, right? So it doesn't matter that it's sitting on a cloud. The point is it's town of Greenwich data, right? So
Yeah, so
that's the difference, yeah.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Well, first of all, I want to just say one thing and ask one question and then make one comment. We should remember, this is a pilot program, and the idea of a pilot program is to really learn. And so therefore, a lot of great questions coming up from members of the BET. I would ask whether the Conservation Commission and DPW would be willing to come back here. I don't think we need a condition or anything, but I do think the question is, would you be willing to come back in 6 months or so, give a little update as to how it's going, what you're learning, and is that something you're willing to do?
I'm willing to do that. I don't want to speak for Jim.
Yeah, I mean, it might also just fall right into our budget cycle
Yeah.
next year too, depending on where we're at with getting these implemented and then getting some feedback on the data and so forth. It might just fall into that same timeframe.
I think
but
that'd
yeah,
be great.
Either one.
The other thing I'd like to do is take a moment to sort of read into the record a few comments made by our first selectman, who says, relating to this grant, this is about receiving a grant from DEEP. He said, I appreciate and 100% support the town accepting this nearly $16,000 grant. It has been vetted, discussed, voted on, and supported unanimously by the Board of Selectmen. It is not only good for the environment, it makes good financial sense as this diverts material from the waste stream and will save the town money. He goes on to talk about his experience as a business owner. I will skip that, but I will add the last sentence of his email, which says, I can attest to the fact that every other municipality that I know would jump all over this, and I hope Greenwich does the same. So I agree with our first selectman. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for a record vote. Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Mr. Kalb is on the phone, perhaps? Absent. Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
Abstain.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
Yes.
Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps, are you on the phone?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm a yes.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Olczak?
Yes.
Okay, that's 10-01. Sarah, I know you've got a meeting to get to. Do you want to defer your report on the hazard mitigation program update, or do you want to give that anyway?
It's very quick. I'm
Okay,
willing to
it's
be
up to you.
Just get it done. So at the February BET meeting, I was asked to give quarterly in-person updates on the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So at the February 24th meeting, the BET approved the town appropriating the funds from this grant, which was over $1 million. The town law department finalized the homeowner agreement, and the town and the property owners were able to review. The homeowners signed it about 2 weeks later, in early March. Then the first selectman had to sign it, and that got sent back up to the state and FEMA. The first quarterly update that we're required to do for the grant and the grant conditions was submitted on April 3rd to the state DEMIS, and they confirmed receipts. There were no reimbursements made at this point, so the town is not requesting money from the state. The state's not giving us any money at this point. April 8th, I met with staff from the building department and zoning enforcement, James Lunny, who's the zoning enforcement officer, John Valerie and Ken Wheeler with the building department. We've set up monthly check-ins to see if either property has submitted any documentation. Each person in the meeting went back to their respective departments and spoke with their staff, as well as setting up a special alert in our municity database system for permitting and compliance. The Apple Tree Lane has an existing wetlands permit for this home elevation that was reviewed by my wetlands department. We have an automated note in the municity system for our department, so staff can see that, but there's also a physical reminder on the permit file for any modifications need to be run through conservation. The Conservation Department will see the Northway application when it comes through planning and zoning for its CAM application. Conservation staff reviews planning and zoning as an advisory committee, so we will see that even if it's somehow didn't get picked up in the monthly meetings with the other departments. And then we actually have a site visit scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the representatives from FEMA. They're coming down from Boston and the state. So that is the update that I wanted to give you all.
Terrific, thank you.
You're welcome.
And if it's quarterly, we do not meet in August, so we'll see you in September.
That was a great
Do you think
report. I appreciate the thoroughness.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I'll take a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Mr. Selps moves, Mr. Alfano seconds. Any objection to unanimous consent? Okay. I'll have to ask the members of the public to step out. We'll be in executive session. Hopefully, it will not be very long. Okay, we've moved out of executive session at 7:22. The only vote in executive session was to do that. I'm now going to go to the next item on the agenda, which is to open the public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant Program Fiscal 26 budget. Do we have any member of the public that wants to speak? And we do. Ms. Vulgaris, our chairman of the CDBG committee and moderator.
Should have picture. There you go. I hope I have enough. I should. Hang on. Make sure that some that are few. I'm sorry. Where did I do that?
Do you have enough?
Ms. Moriarty. No. Thank you so much. Change to be on this side of the lectern. All right.
You can push the button to go on the microphone.
All right. I am before you this evening in my capacity as chair of the Community Block Grant Development Advisory Group, CDAC, a position that I've held for approximately 10 years, and one that is unrelated to my service on the RTM. Recently, the first selectman amended 3 of the awards proposed by the advisory committee, and I am respectfully requesting that the BET use its authority tonight to restore the block grant awards to the amounts proposed unanimously by the advisory committee. Every 2 years, roughly 30 members of the Greenwich community volunteer to serve on the block grant advisory committee. Ms. Jansen and Ms. Deschamps are current term representatives. Mr. Weisbrod was part of it in 2017 and 18. I don't know if any other longer-serving members, whether Karen or Leslie have served before, but I always think it's a great way to learn about what the community's doing.
I did, Alexis.
Oh, you did? Okay, good. So this group is tasked with evaluating dozens of grant applications and making some very difficult decisions, but considered choices about which programs to fund and at what funding level. In a perfect world, we would fund fully every applicant. However, we simply don't have the money. The money awarded to Greenwich from HUD, which is the federal agency that sponsors block grant, has consistently dwindled over the years, making the evaluation and recommendation process more challenging. This year, program year 2025, HUD awarded Greenwich a total of $732,000. However, it's important to understand that HUD has strict funding guidelines and percentage caps for subcategories within the total award. So 20% of that total money, $146,000, is awarded and reserved for administrative expenses. Can't change that, federal guidelines. 16.25%, or $117,000, is reserved for public service grants, and the remaining 63.75%, or $461,000, is reserved for public facility or capital grants. Essentially, the advisory committee has roughly $578,000 to allocate to the 35 applicants that applied this year, and those total requests are over $1.5 million. Recognizing that there is a significant shortfall between the money requested and funds available, the advisory committee conducts a rigorous and lengthy grant evaluation process spanning several months. We begin with inviting every applicant to present their applications to the full advisory committee, where members then have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions concerning the application process. After the public hearing, we form site visit subcommittees where at least 2, if not 3, members of the advisory committee visit the proposed service provider to evaluate the facility and get a better sense of the scope of the work being proposed. And finally, after all of the sites have been visited, the advisory committee comes together for a very lengthy meeting where we determine funding priorities and vote on our recommendations. It's a mini version of your budget decision day. Again, it is not an easy task, and each and every application is worthwhile. In no way should a program that is not funded infer that the decision is an indictment directed at their facility or program. This year, the advisory committee voted unanimously to not award money to an application submitted by Greenwich Communities for a project concerning walkways at Wilbur Peck. I've given you pictures of the project that they submitted. These were pictures that the Housing Authority or Greenwich Communities submitted in the application book. These are not my pictures. Greenwich Communities submitted a $171,900 request for an exterior lobby painting project where paint on some of the walkways and balconies needed refurbishment. The committee unanimously viewed this project as one that was largely aesthetic in scope and with limited direct value to the residents. It was not going to improve their interior living conditions by replacing windows or renovating kitchens. Projects that have recently received generous funding from Block Grant, nor was the lobby walkway project going to replace a more meaningful outside structure, such as an aging roof. In 2020, when the Block Grant had substantially more money to award, we had $1.5 million that year, a grant was awarded to Greenwich Communities for walkway improvements. However, this year, given our very limited resources, the committee, again unanimously, chose to focus on projects that had greater direct client impact and greater safety value. Recently, the first selectman used his ability to amend the grant awards and directed $50,000 towards the Wilbur Peck Walkway Improvement Project by reducing awards to 3 projects that the advisory committee believed had higher direct benefits to the clients and certainly higher safety values for the facilities. It should be noted that Greenwich Communities has been the single largest beneficiary of Block Grant awards since 1997. They have received over $4.2 million in grant money since that time. In the last 4 years, Greenwich Communities has received over $463,000, and for comparative purposes, the organization with the second highest allocation in that time span has received over $290,000. The advisory committee is well aware of the services Greenwich Communities provides to residents. However, we believe that other local nonprofits that also serve marginalized Greenwich residents submitted stronger and more compelling applications for capital grants. So what were they? The 3 organizations whose funding were reduced so money could be redirected to an exterior walkway painting project were Inspirica, Greenwich YMCA, and Greenwich YWCA. Inspirica provides emergency housing services to women and their children. They requested a grant, $66,000, to help offset the total cost of a new playground at one of their shelters. This playground is aged, it doesn't have safe equipment anymore, and it serves homeless children, and the next closest playground in the neighborhood is over a half-mile away, so certainly not something that young children can access easily. The advisory committee felt that awarding a grant to an emergency shelter that provides services to homeless women and children to rebuild that playground was a better use of our very limited federal tax block grant dollars. The YWCA, which provides many, many services in the community, but especially to victims of domestic violence through their Harmony Project, is seeking funding to help offset the cost of installing a new generator and a transfer switch. The total cost of that project is $200,000. We recommended an award of $50,000. During a power outage, the committee felt that it was important for a facility that works with victims of domestic violence to be able to continue their work unimpeded. The administrators of the YM also stated that in the event of a power outage, members of the community may use the facility as a cooling or warming center and/or a location to charge communication and medical devices. Again, the advisory committee felt that that was a better use of the very limited block grant dollars. And finally, the YMCA, which serves approximately 790 daily users, many of those children participating in an aquatics program, requested $72,000 to pay for the purchase and the installation of a new emergency intercom and notification system. Advisory committee recommended an award of $51,000 to purchase the system that could be integrated with their existing security and also critically would be linked with their lockdown mode. So in the event of an emergency, this notification system would tap into their lockdown mode and help notify and shut down the building. Again, the advisory committee felt that awarding a grant that could be used to purchase an emergency intercom/lockdown was a better use of the very limited federal block grant dollars. The advisory committee takes its responsibility to thoroughly evaluate community block grant applications seriously and without prejudice. Many of the committee members have served on the advisory council committee, have a deep understanding of the knowledge of the applicants and the services they provide. This should not be viewed as a partisan or political issue. And if you sincerely believe that an exterior walkway painting project is more important and has greater value than a generator or a new playground for homeless children and an emergency/lockdown intercom notification system, then by all means, vote for the proposal before you. However, I think it is a more responsible vote if you would vote on the appropriations that were unanimously endorsed by the advisory committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm reminded that we should have moved and seconded the block grant appropriations. If I could get a motion, please.
Second.
Mr. Selfs moved, Ms. Tarkington seconded. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, the public hearing remains open for a while. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the assessor's report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I'd like to present the assessor's report for May 2025. First of all, we sent out income and expense forms to all commercial property owners who lease their property. That will be they are due back to our office on June 2nd, as June 1st is a Sunday this year. It is important that we get this back, especially this year as we're doing the 2025 revaluation. On the 2024 grand list, we have 5 additional tax appeals. There were 3 filed against the town. There are 3 residential and 2 commercial. The deadline for filing tax appeals has passed, so this is all that we should be getting this year is those 5 additional tax appeals. We are working on the senior property tax relief. Currently, we have, for this year, we'll have 438 applicants that will qualify for the state and local senior property tax relief. Once you all set a mill rate this evening, I shall be able to determine the credits due, and I'll give that to you in our June report. As you know, this, tax bills are being scheduled to go out on June 13th. So we will have all of, the assessor's office will have our file ready for the tax collector by the end of the month. Does anybody have any questions for me this evening?
You said 438 applicants for the senior, local or state. Do you have the number for last year's?
Yes, last year's we had 437.
Okay, very close.
So we've added some and lost some, but basically netted it out about the same.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to accept the
I
assessor's report.
move that we accept the assessor's report.
Second, moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Ms. Moriarty to accept the assessor's report. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that's 11-0-0. Mr. Kalb, have you joined yet? No. I'm sorry? I'm pretty sure that he's on. Mr. Kalb, are you on the phone? If you need to unmute, press *6.
Hi there, I'm here.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
yes, we can. Thank you. So
Thank you.
we'll count you as present. So without objection, we accept the assessor's report 12-0-0. We'll now move to requests for budget adjustments, which I will simply read out. We have two routine applications. PL1 with Pratt Library for $30,750, a transfer for electric service / maintenance. And CC2, the Conservation Commission, for $8,000, approval to use an NCG Connecticut OPM grant. It's a reimbursement grant. So those two are before us as routine applications. Can I have a motion to move those?
So moved.
Without objection, anybody object to unanimous consent? So that's 12-0-0. Next to the non-routine applications, the first one is SE11, the first selectman, for a settlement of Eversource versus the town of Greenwich. I'll start with a report of the Budget Committee.
We did not hear this, Mr. Chair.
Oh, that's right. Law Committee?
Yes, the Law Committee heard this case. It's actually a settlement. This involved a fire truck for the town skidding on some ice and hitting a telephone pole, for which Verizon and Eversource maintains the pole. And there was no question that the town fire truck damaged the pole. So the settlement amount for which we have an invoice was $10,345.14. And the Law Committee approved this amount 200.
Could you move this for the board, please?
And we'll be moving this for the board.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Self seconds. Ms. Fasciotis moved. Any objection to unanimous approval for this item? Seeing and hearing none, this is approved 12-0-0. Next item is SE2, also the first selectman, a settlement very similar of Verizon versus the town of Greenwich. SE12, sorry. Ms. Fasciotis.
And again, the Law Committee heard this, and again, this was the fire truck that took out the Verizon pole, and the amount for settlement to replace the pole by Verizon was $5,863.64, and the Law Committee voted 200 to recommend this to the BET, and I'm so moving it.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Fasciotis, seconded by Mr. Selps. Is there any objection to unanimous consent on this? Seeing and hearing none, that means this is 12-0-0. The third one is ED2, the Board of Education, $325,000, an additional appropriation for the Hamilton Avenue HVAC targeted at the geothermal. I'll move this forward. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so ED2, HF, and LM. It's been moved and seconded. We don't have anybody from the Board of Ed, but this was discussed extensively at Budget Committee meetings and elsewhere. Do you want to report on this?
Yes, this item was added as an additional agenda item, the Hamilton Avenue geothermal HVAC system. Ms. Moriarty made a motion to add this item to the agenda for consideration of the Hamilton Avenue School geothermal HVAC system in the amount of $325,000, which was for the A&E, architectural and engineering for the project. And then she did this based on the actions by the RTM at its budget meeting, and which they recommended that the geothermal system be pursued. And so there was a discussion about using these as design funds, and the committee's vote, the vote to add it was 4-0-0, and the committee's vote on the item was 3-1-0.
Any discussion? Ms. Fasleotis?
Yes, I just, I can't find it right now, but I thought that one of the state statutes allows for a building committee to replace HVAC, which would allow us to recoup some money from the state. And I was wondering if anybody had any information, or if the Board of Ed had any information, and whether or not that was going to be pursued. I'll try to find it. I had it in one of my emails to myself, but I just can't find it right now. But I would just like somebody to follow up with the Board of Ed to see if there is the possibility of getting a state grant to replace the HVAC and possibly recoup some money.
I would support that. I
Yeah.
think the project is approximately, at least, as has been presented in the budget, at $5.2 million, so it makes sense.
Okay. Ms. Moriarty?
Just the one caveat, I have several comments, but the one caveat to that is this item is on the call for the RTM June 9th meeting. So in theory, this project could get started as soon as this summer. If we ask them to review whether it should be under the purview of a building committee, that will delay it by 5 months or something. I would propose that if it should be under, or can be under, a building committee for state reimbursement, perhaps the design funds maybe is something we would be willing to fund ourselves and go after the construction funds. Relating to the 325, I just want to refer my colleagues to the CIP sheet that was presented in the First Selectmen's budget to us back in January, which gave the breakout of the costs. And so the 325 comes right from that document for design funding.
Ms. Fasleotis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little troubled by that, the fact that you're willing to give away, $325,000 of taxpayer money. If there is a reimbursement potential, this project has already been delayed a few years, and, I just would like somebody to look into the fact that we could get tax dollars back.
Now, if I can respond, I agree if there's reasonable amount of funding to be had, but keep in mind that we're paying for a temporary system on a monthly basis. So a 5-month delay in starting the project, it may end up being a negative cash. It may cost the town more money. I don't know what the reimbursement rate would be for this project, if it's, 20%, which is what our construction projects are, actually 10% for renovations. That would only work out to $30,000, and that probably is a lot less than
That's 1 month's rental.
1 month's rental, right? So I think it should be looked into. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm not sure it's obvious that the answer is let's go for a school building committee before we even start the project.
Anybody else?
Well, I would like to propose a condition on this to ask the BOE to look into the possibility of a building committee / state grant. We can always release the condition when they come back to us, and they would have time to get this going after our June meeting. So I'm proposing a condition that this be approved on the condition that the BOE looks into the possibility of a grant and/or building committee, to recoup monies off of this project.
I would second that motion.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak whenever it's appropriate?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Thank you. With respect to Ms. Fasciolotis' question, it's a good one, and it's an important one. What I can say as your EMAC representative for the BET, that this question has come up numerous times over the years, the state grant funding, as well as ITC, the investment tax credit. And as a result of delay for this project and others, we're no longer going to be able to likely take advantage of ITC. Not necessarily known for sure, but the delay has caused some challenges with respect to getting certainty around the ITC reimbursement rates for projects similar to this. The state grant monies, I know were looked at by the public school system, GPS, over the years, and I don't think there's a need personally for a condition for that. My belief would be, and we could confirm this, that this ought to be seeking out any type of grant funding reimbursement that would be available. And as Ms. Moriarty mentioned, this is for design work. This $325,000. That's all this is for. And so there's nothing that would preclude anyone from looking at getting state reimbursement or any other grant reimbursement, including from Eversource or other entities. So this condition isn't thought about in terms of an omni basis of where else could we get money from. What I would just simply say is the 325 is for the design funding. This has been discussed so many times. We have discussed this as a group for a long period. I've reported into everyone about this with the ACOM report. There's no purpose in my mind to rehash all of the elements of this. I think it's very clear the public wants this. The RTM voted overwhelmingly in favor, and I think we should operate on the assumption, and we should follow, and I will do that as the EMAC rep, making sure that any grant funding or any other reimbursement mechanisms are made available at the appropriate time after we've approved this design funding.
Ms. Fasciotis?
Yeah, I know that Governor Lamont was supposed to be including or exploring the 2025 legislative options on this. So again, I would just encourage that, somebody contact our state legislators, and I would just ask that, they come back. They can come back in June and tell us that, this grant program has not been, renewed by Mr. Lamont or the legislature, and, we can release the funds. I just, again, think it's important that we find whatever money we can.
Any other discussion?
I would totally agree. Sorry, if I could just, I
Yeah, go
completely
ahead.
agree with Ms. Fasciolotis on that. Thank you. I'm sorry. I completely agree with Ms. Fasciolotis on that point, and I think I have a responsibility as your liaison for EMAC and for GPS. I'm happy to relay those thoughts. They're not yours alone. I think all of us would agree with it. So I don't think there's any disputing that that's an important thing to be looking at. And I'd be happy to, so that we don't over-engineer this with conditions and so on, simply say I will relay this information back to EMAC. They've been looking at these things as well, making sure we're getting fundings and rebates, et cetera. And I'd also be happy to liaise with Mr. Brannion to make sure that they are pursuing any and all potential rebates and make sure that that's reported back to this body.
Okay, any other discussion?
Yeah, I think it boils down to the original wording that Karen suggested didn't pose a problem for me because she simply said that the Board of Ed looks into the possibility, which is essentially what Matt is saying. But now she's adding new language which says that then they have to come back again to us for another approval, which I think would delay the project. So I'm okay with the idea of looking into, but I think there has to be a minimum level of trust here, and that is that either both our representative from this body, Matt Deschamps, as well as the Board of Ed itself, once we put a condition that says they'll look into it, we trust that they will look into it and they'll report back to us. But let's not put another hurdle on that says they have to come back for another vote, because I think that does risk slowing the project down. So I would say, if you leave it to the fact, let them look into it, that's okay. But if you want to add the issue of coming back for a reapproval, that's not okay. Are you willing to do that?
Ms. Fasciotis.
I think, we have a condition, we would have to release the condition somehow, so I don't really see that there would be an option.
They can write a memo that would release it, that they've looked into it. I mean, we can't micromanage every single nickel that's spent. I mean, I think we have Matt Deschamps giving his commitment, who's a member of this body, and then we'd ask them to write a memo, and that would alleviate the issue.
Anybody else? Ms. Aurora?
I'm just a little confused. The $325,000 is for redesigning I'm sorry, I missed the budget committee, so I apologize if this was discussed in detail, but maybe Leslie, you could answer. It is to redesign the geothermal system that's already implemented.
It was discussed at Budget Committee, yes, and at Budget Committee, and our research showed that the engineering had never been completed, so in order to proceed with the actual RFP, the engineering would have to be completed, and as Ms. Moriarty said, the CIP sheet showed that cost was $325,000. I will also add that the engineering work was never completed for a traditional HVAC system also. That work has not been done and will be part of moving ahead with the project.
So that's just.
No,
That is not part of the motion.
that's
That was
not
not
right.
approved.
That was not approved.
Traditional
no.
system is not part
No,
of this motion.
and I didn't say it was. I said what we learned was that neither one had any architectural engineering.
No, but you then added, all right, as long as that.
That's what we learned.
So to be clear, I'm just trying to get clarity on what we're voting on. The $325,000 is for design work on the geothermal.
It creates construction documents.
Construction drawings. The engineering drawings that would be needed in order
I
to
guess the
send the
reason I'm
project out
confused
there.
is that I thought the whole discussion on geothermal was that we had already implemented this system. It didn't work. That's why we were going back to the traditional system. Obviously, that's where the reason that we're having these discussions at length and why there's a lack of trust in the system is because if you remember 2 years ago, the Board of Ed said they could not do the geothermal. Dan Watson said, we cannot support the geothermal. So we supported the traditional because that's what the Board of Ed wanted. 1 year later, when the RTM had flipped to be, as we know, a little bit more progressive, the Board of Ed suddenly said, now we can do the geothermal. It came to the BET and we kind of saw the politics at play and we said no. So now I think what happened at the Budget Committee is we are now putting in design, and I understand where the RTM voted, Matt, thank you for that. But we also know what the composition of these bodies today looks like. So if we come back to, well, we are now going to put $325,000 to redesign the system, I'm not sure when did we ever do the analysis to see is the traditional system going to make sense or not. I thought that was the whole point, to see what is going to be economically more feasible, not just say, well, we're going down the geothermal path because that's where the Board of Ed voted last. Because if you remember, we've had 2 different votes in 2 years for the same project.
Mr. Fisher?
Well, we've obviously been thwarted by the RTM.
But it's back to us, right? So why would we not just now not do a study
Hold on a
on
sec.
both?
Mr. Fisher?
Why would we not just do a study on both, just to get information
The
to the
study's been
body?
done, if I may speak. Mr.
Yes, Ms.
Fisher?
Moriarty, and then
So,
Mr. Deschamps.
Every member of this board has received the AECom analysis of what a geothermal system needs to be designed to work for a Hamilton Avenue school and compared it to what a traditional HVA system would do. The analysis showed that the capital costs are relatively the same, but there's operating cost savings. And Matt will correct me if that was a misstatement. But let me read you from the CIP sheet, which gives the work that Ms. Aurora is forgetting that occurred in the past 2 years. After extensive evaluation and consultation with AECom and the town's Energy Management Advisory Committee, the evaluation of the building's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system has been completed. The 25-year life cycle shows that geothermal costs of $158,443 savings compared to a conventional system. The proposed scope of work repurposes the 2-pipe changeover system and is using it as a chilled water system, replacing the water-to-water heat pumps with 6-pipe heat pump chillers connected to the geothermal fields and adding reheat coils downstream from the AHUs for heating and reheat. The new configuration allows the heat pumps to simultaneously produce heating hot water and chilled water for space conditioning, and when the heating and cooling loads are not balanced, the geothermal field can be used as a sink or a source. The current system only provides for either heating or cooling. So what this is saying is some of the system, the pumps above ground, need to be redesigned and reconfigured. The wells were tested and they are all in working order. And the analysis that AECom provided to both our board and was shared with the RTM recommends moving forward with a geothermal system. We want to get this project started. We want to get it moving along, solve the problem at the school. If this board is still dabbling with, we need to spend money to design a conventional system, we're wasting time and resources. And that is just not advisable at this point, which is why the motion at the Budget Committee that was supported 3-1-0 is to move forward with the design funds of $325,000 for a geothermal system at Hamath.
So
Mr. Deschamps?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to repeat what Ms. Moriarty stated because it was a perfect summary of the important piece that Ms. Aurora is skipping over, which was that there was significant work done between the time that Mr. Watson reported to this body, predates my participation on it, but I followed that, and he was concerned about issues related to geothermal. Those were addressed in the AECom report. I, as your EMAC liaison, was sitting through various meetings throughout this project, as you all know, because I've reported on this many times already, and made sure of a couple of things. One is that the engineering report, which you have and have had for a long time, did a complete analysis of both the geothermal and the traditional system. I thought it was very important that both systems were evaluated side by side because that had not been done before. Ms. Moriarty summarized perfectly what the summary of those findings were by the engineers, trained engineers in the space, by the way, that Mr. Watson hired to do the work. The second thing I wanted to make sure that I thought it was really important was that he could support the system. In other words, could GPS support this system? Because to have a geothermal system installed, even if it was more cost effective, and we didn't know at the beginning of the project whether it would be, but it turns out it is, and it's the better solution economically for taxpayers. But could it be maintained? And so I asked Mr. Watson and Mr. Brandy to make sure as well that could you maintain this? And the answer I repeatedly got upon persistent questioning was yes. And I think you have all heard that Mr. Watson said yes. Now, the reason Mr. Watson said yes now, and Mr. Brandy said yes, is not because the RTM made some vote. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the fact that the engineering report and the new system that they're putting in is markedly different and simpler to use than anything that we've seen in the past. This is a pretty basic to use system. Mr. Watson got comfortable with that because he sat in, and I've given him credit for this as I reported again to all of you, to all of those meetings, and he came out of the mind that he could support this system fairly simplistically. And I'm sure certain of you have reached out to him independently to confirm that is the case, and he's reported that is the case, that he can support this system. So all the elements necessary to move forward with the geothermal are there in my mind. It's cost effective. Didn't know that in the beginning, but it's cost effective. It deals with the noise mitigation issue, which would be presented in the traditional system, which has not been priced in, which would further increase the cost of the traditional system. And to delay this more is, I think at this point, unfair to the public that has been dealing with this temporary system, and it's not cost effective to keep that in place any longer than need be. So, I think that this motion, this 325, this concept of moving forward with the geothermal design and moving forward with this project in that regard makes a lot of sense at this point.
Ms. Aurora?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't agree with the premise of this discussion. I think the point that this is going to be more cost-effective, it makes a lot of assumptions about the fact that we're going to be able to figure this out, the system's going to work as designed. And, I think we should just look at markets to figure out why is geothermal not being implemented in municipal projects. You saw the governor just recently, I think a month or two ago, and he is committed, it's a Democrat governor in the state of Connecticut who was looking at geothermal to, I think, and I don't remember the details if it was for the Capitol building or a municipal building nearby, but there was a research to do geothermal, and he was a commitment, and he, at the end, before executing, decided to bypass. It's just a month ago, and it's not because we don't believe in clean energy, we don't believe in climate. I've talked many times on this DS that I have 3 electric cars. I don't believe that means that everybody should drive electric. When it makes sense for markets to work, we go there. We've spoken about how many people have geothermal in their homes. I know some people think it's worth the investment, some people don't. But I think when you see a higher level of adoption, even in the private sector, that's when the public sector should start getting into this. There are a lot of assumptions. We've already made this mistake once. To go back and try to keep doing this over and over again makes no sense. And that my judgment tells me that we should not be and again, I'm one of 12 people, is that we should not be throwing more good money after bad money, so to speak. So I don't support this. I don't know why in the budget committee this would have gotten approved just for a redesign of geothermal when we had already taken the vote. I understand the RTM flipped this, but nothing happened in that 1 year other than the fact that the RTM body changed. So, we can all, say, well, no, that's not what happened, but that's all that happened. It is a little bit more progressive. There is a very different view, and I don't think there's a right view or a wrong view. It's just that I don't think that's where the Greenwich community is today. I think if you were to poll the Greenwich community, I don't think the majority of the community would say we should start doing geothermal in municipal projects. I really don't think we're there.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Last I looked, Ms. Aurora, you're not a certified engineer. You don't have the competence, background, skill,
Mr.
study.
Weisbrod, be very careful here, please.
I'm going to be careful to override a study done by a world-renowned engineering company that I doubt if you read, because if you read it, the conclusions are clear and self-evident. And so you can assert what you want and you can vote against this, and anybody who wants to vote against it, they're entitled to your vote and your opinion. But you're not entitled to the facts and the science. The science, the study, the engineer that's qualified to act as an engineer that was hired in that role has determined that there is a $158,443 savings here. And I'll go with the study, I'll go with the qualified engineer over the view of anybody's, personal opinion.
Harry, I have to comment.
Ms. Aurora?
One, I am actually a chemical engineer by degree. I did read the report. I think I probably have a more clear background of an understanding of evaluating that report than probably you do. I know your background is in finance. But I will say that when I speak about what my personal opinion is, it is not based upon me denying climate. This is not what this is about. That's not what we are discussing. Again, I have 3 electric cars. I have no gas vehicles. I don't think, Mr. Weisbrod, you have geothermal in your house. If you really believe in it, I think you would think if it's a better long-term investment, maybe you should take out your natural gas, HVAC, and put in geothermal. And I'm not suggesting you do it. I don't need you to
My house
opine
is
on
not
it.
on the agenda.
You don't, and it doesn't need to be. But the point I'm making is if it's good enough for the private sector, that's when the public sector starts adopting it. There is a reason we are where we are. This is not me saying I'm denying climate. I'm saying the private sector is not yet ready to adopt. Why are we going to push it on the public sector? So this is not a personal opinion. I'm just stating facts. If you look at Greenwich, we have 22,000 households. How many geothermal systems do we have? Less than 1%, less than 0.5%.
Mr. Olczak?
Thank you. I want to make 2 points. Firstly, I do have geothermal. I didn't ask my engineers that, I didn't tell them I wanted geothermal. I hired 2 national firms, both based in Norwalk. You can look them up, Altieri, Seaborg Weber. They've done several museums in the city of New York. I hired Stephen Green, another nationally known firm. They recommended to me geothermal, and I installed it. I'm very familiar with the technology. The reason why there's not a lot of adoption is because there's a higher upfront cost, and that turns a lot of people off. So the other point I want to make here is the economics on this particular installation is different because we've already have some sunk costs here. We've already drilled these holes. So that expense, we've already performed the work. More importantly, it's not that we spent the money, it's that we've already performed the work. So the way to look at this is what's past is past. What's this going to cost us to move this forward in the future? This is a well-known technology, and as a chemical engineer, I'm sure you know that there's nothing simpler, right? There's nothing simpler than drilling a hole and you're pumping glycol in a pipe that circulates. It couldn't be, and you use a pump to pump it, and then you've got a heat exchange. It's the simplest technology. We went, as Mr. Deschamps said, we consulted with an engineer. The engineer made their recommendations, and we're basing our decision upon an independent engineer. Nobody, I think, on this BET is advocating geothermal just for the sake of advocating it. We're interested in what's the most cost-effective way, irrespective of whether it's green. What's the most cost-effective system for the town to utilize? And last point is geothermal is used throughout the state. It's completely false to say that geothermal is not being used in our state. That's just incorrect. And if you'd like, we'll provide you with a list of schools across the state that have already installed geothermal. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Selps?
Here we are, once again, relitigating this very same issue using almost identical arguments to what we did on decision day. The fact is, on decision day, this board said that it wanted to go back and relook at the traditional chiller method. And then the BET said, no, 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 stick with the plan. We really meant it when we said geothermal. But now some members of this board say, well, and by the way, it passed over that the motion to delete the traditional chiller funding at the BET, at the board, at the RTM passed overwhelmingly. And now we're told, well, you know what? The town really doesn't support that. I'm insulted by that because what the board is really saying is, I don't care what the RTM says. I don't care what the school says, we know better. I reject that as a matter of representative democracy. We're wasting time with this. We had the vote last time. Some people just don't like it.
Ms. Tarkington.
So I just point out that, well, Mr. Selp said, made the point. I can reverse it and say that the RTM did not like the original BET vote back in November 23, for which we have Mr. Watson's memo on file. And, I think that we need to make sure we understand and respect each part of our town government for the other. So you can't talk about one without mentioning the other first. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do.
Ms. Jansen.
Yes, I just have a point of order. The budget as approved for fiscal year '26 has a BET condition that requests for a conventional HVAC quote. Don't we as a board have, if we're waiving that, don't we have to vote on waiving that condition? It seems to me that somehow there was a condition that passed.
The answer is that that was a condition on an item that was totally rejected by the RTM, so that carries the condition out.
Oh, because they removed
The
the
RTM
project,
removed
the
the
condition
project,
goes
the
away.
condition goes
I
away.
see, okay, got it.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote, please.
Well, we first have to vote on the condition.
On the condition, yes, I'm sorry. We're voting on the condition that the Board of Ed look into grants and/or a billing committee for getting reimbursement from the state. Is that adequately
And reports back to the,
And reports back to us
at the June meeting.
at the June meeting? Mr. Alchek.
Yes, I'll vote for that condition to be added.
Point of order.
What's wrong?
Did you hear the condition?
The condition is.
Wow.
You don't like the vote?
The question that I understand is they'll look into.
And then,
And report back.
Back to the BET at the June meeting.
and report back. I don't know if you heard it, that's why I'm asking.
Mr. Deschamps.
Okay. Elliot,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
vote the
could
way you
just
want to vote.
repeat the condition? I want to make sure I understand it. It's to report back in the June meeting?
Yes.
The wording is to look into and report back to us in the June meeting for state grant reimbursement.
For-
And the building committee.
For forming a building committee to take advantage of state reimbursement.
The Board of Ed.
So they have to come, so in order,
The Board of Ed looks into the state or federal grants. A building committee is formed if appropriate, and then reports back to the BET at the June meeting.
in the June meeting, okay, and then they would release the 325 at that point, once they reported back that they looked into it?
Correct. I mean, there would be a vote, there would be a vote, there would be a vote to release the
Yeah, I
condition.
mean, like I said, I'll vote in favor of that, but as I said, I mean, I wouldn't even just make it inclusive of states, right? If we're looking at Eversource, we'll look at a few different things. I mean, I think that's just what they should be doing. I don't see why we'd be conditioning this, but I'll support it if it makes people comfortable.
Well-
I mean, I can tell you we're doing work independently, if I may, there's work being independently done to make sure that we're not missing the ITC credit. And you're not putting that as a condition. So like, this is work that just, that you need to do. They have fiduciary responsibilities to do this, and we're micromanaging and conditioning things that I frankly think are superfluous, unnecessary. But if it makes you comfortable to put it in as a condition, I see no reason not to. But
Okay.
there's a lot more work
Okay.
than even your condition.
Can I,
So yes.
based on,
Well, we're in a voting
I
period.
understand that. But, I think that it's important that we get an answer as to whether or not there,
We
Yeah,
really, I
okay.
think it's clear.
that's
We're
fine.
voting.
Okay.
Mr. Alchek, did you want to interject something? Or is your vote stand as yes?
Let me pass for the moment.
Okay. Ms. Aurora,
Yeah, I'm a yes.
you're a yes. Mr. Selps? Ms. Fasliotis?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Tarkington.
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty.
No.
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm a no.
Weisbrod.
No.
Ms. Jansen.
Yes.
Mr. Kalb.
No.
This is a no. Mr. Alfano.
Yes.
Mr. Alcheck.
I'm a no.
Mr. Selps. I'm a no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 5, 0. The motion for the condition passes. Is there any further discussion on the item? If not, I'm going to call for a roll call vote on ED2, the $325,000 additional appropriation for the Hamilton Avenue HVAC on a geothermal basis. Mr. Alfano.
Yes.
Mr. Kalb.
Yes.
Ms. Jansen.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty.
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Fasliotis.
I'm going to pass.
Mr. Selps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
Mr. Alcheck.
Yes.
Ms. Fasliotis.
I'm going to vote no right now. Thank you. If they report back, I will.
Okay, that's 10-0. The motion passes. We'll move on to the Comptroller's report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. First of all, through the chairman to Ms. Tarkington, just a friendly reminder. I apologize I couldn't make the meeting last month, the Affordable Housing Trust.
And I remembered, but I was waiting for you.
Okay, because
But
I've
we're-
only got 1 month left.
Okay, well,
I'll come back, though, in
no,
case you need me.
we'll make sure it's done, Pete. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
And then, has Agnes been formally introduced?
Yes. Yeah, the last meeting.
The BET?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So hopefully we culminate the budget process tonight with the passing of the mill rate. And just one final comment is the annual audit. Joan Lynch and I had a very good, in my opinion, conversation with the partner from RSM US LLP, and we're going to give it our best shot, and they're going to give it their best shot, and I think we're going to get a December 31st approval of the ACFR and the single audit. And having stated that, I'll take any questions on the controller's report.
December 31st or June?
That's by state statute. We're supposed to have the audit filed with OPM. If you can't make it, you have to file for an extension, which we've been doing for the last 3 years.
Okay.
Year one was GASB 87, I'm sorry. Year one was Nathaniel Weatherall, and then GASB 87, and then Human Resources at their end. So we're looking for December 31st for this year, for the June 30th, 2025 audit.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the Comptroller's report? Seeing none, may I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Ms. Tarkington moves to accept.
Second.
Mr. Alfano seconds. Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that's 12-0. Seeing and hearing none, that's 12-0-0. Treasurer's report,
I'll
please.
take any questions on the treasurer's report.
Any questions?
I move we accept the treasurer's report.
Been moved. I'll take a second. I'm going to give that to Ms. Moriarty. I think she was first. Any objection to unanimous consent on that? Seeing and hearing none, that's 12-0-0. Okay, we're getting close to closing the public hearing for the CDBG. Is there any member of the public that wants to be heard in that regard? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing at 8:20. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We're now moving to the requests for budget adjustments. It's already been moved. CD1, the CDBG approval to use $778,136.32. Mr. Cow.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
That must have been a fast drive.
Straight from New Haven. Thank you, colleagues. Sorry to be late.
No, that's quite all right. You had a good excuse.
Congratulations on your daughter as well.
Okay, the CD1 has been moved and seconded.
Like to make a
Short
motion?
committee
Yeah,
sorry?
we need a committee report.
Okay.
Just have a short one. The request is for acceptance and use of the 2025, program year 2025 Community Development Block Grant entitlement, including reprogram funds for a total anticipated budget of $786,552.32.
That
And
amount differs than what's on our agenda.
is it different? Uh-oh.
778, 136.32.
It's the reprogram funds.
Is that the right?
That's the reprogram funds.
778 is correct. I sent in a revised budget form and resolution. We found out from what our allocation was at the time that we initially submitted.
Okay, the explanation for the difference is that they were advised of the final allocation from HUD. So the 778, 136.32 in the BET agenda is the correct number.
And I was giving the report out of the Budget Committee, and that was the amount at the time the Budget Committee approved the grant.
Right.
And again, I'm sorry, and that was approved 400.
Okay. Anybody? Yes, Ms. Moriarty.
Yes, first I want to express appreciation for all the members of the committee. I know that they work really hard. They meet for over several months. I know Ms. Jansen and Mr. Deschamps were on that committee and did site visits, et cetera.
do that separately.
But it is a difficult process because we only get allotted less than half of what's being requested. I have to say that I am concerned that after 3-4 months of work by the committee and a unanimous vote for their recommendations, that the first selectman then changes the project appropriations and instead awards money to a walkway project rather than items like an emergency generator and intercom system. I think as we heard from the comments in our public hearing from Ms. Vulgaris, chair of that committee, that the Greenwich Communities has been the largest recipient of the CDGB grant funds over the past 4 years. And this year, when their project just didn't meet the same standards and the kinds of construction funds that we can assist with and all of the nonprofits that equally have difficulty raising funds, that the first selectman decided single-handedly to make those changes. So I am making a motion, I guess I gave my explanation first, to revert the recommendations to what was approved by the CDAC committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Moriarty, seconded by Mr. Selps, to revert to the advisory committee recommendations. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Weisbrod?
No,
and then
just
Ms.
to
Jansen.
add, I did serve on the committee, the CDBG committee, and like Ms. Jansen and Mr. Deschamps, who are working on this now. And I do think that the thought that goes into it and the site visits, that were taken and the deliberation over the course of many weeks and the time and energy is a process that has worked and works well. And I don't know if the first selectman, I don't believe that he gave a rationale for overriding what was done at the committee or appeared before the committee or in any way explained or otherwise deliberated on the reasons for his making that change. So I'm quite averse to altering the recommendation of this extreme, especially because it was unanimous, and it's such an extremely thoughtful and, quite frankly, unifying exercise. People from all views and all ideas come together to make these decisions. And so I therefore am supporting the motion that Ms. Moriarty made. I mean, every one of these agencies is worthwhile. It is in no way a reflection at all on the Greenwich communities and the importance of the work they do, but it is an affirmation of the need to support this group that's been working for, quite a number of years, and the work they do, I think, should be supported by us. So that's my reason. Thank you.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes, I have served on the CDBG committee twice. First when I joined the RTM, and now as a BET liaison. And it is tremendously rewarding work to get to know the nonprofits and how much community involvement there is for our most vulnerable and lower income residents. And it's not just Greenwich, it's our neighboring towns. And so this was no different, very thoughtful, methodical discussion. And I actually took on 2 nonprofits, and they were wonderful to get to know. And however, I also think that we have a system of a process with the CDBG where the executive of our town can review the committee recommendations and have another point of view. And I respect that process. So I think no different than Congress goes to the president and the president can veto a bill. I would note that it's not unusual for a CDBG grant that is focused on housing and urban development. It is a HUD grant that community, that this housing actually gets a majority of the funds. I think that is kind of the raison d'etre of the block grant. I would also note that when I looked at the figures, it is about a 29-30% elimination from these other projects. It is not zeroing out the projects. It is taking out a portion. And I would say that when I looked at this picture, I have to say that this kind of follows to me the broken windows theory, that if you have a facility that looks like this, it possibly sends a message to the community that there could be crime and less care. And I personally wouldn't want people in this town who live in our Greenwich communities to have this. So to have a little bit taken out of the other noble, they're all noble projects. It really is a difficult decision. I actually will support this redirection, and I think it's a very good use of funds. So thank you.
Ms. Tarkington?
So I too have served on the Community Development Block Grant program and spent 2 years and find it very worthwhile. It's my understanding that the first selectman did hold a public hearing. And so the applicants, had the opportunity to come before him if they so chose. And he's made his decision. I know in the past, certain years, there have been changes into this. I do support the Greenwich communities getting some benefit from the program. I think that they provide some 12 or 1,300 housing units for the people in our town. And so therefore, if this is the kind of request that they would like to improve their properties and the visibility of them, I will support that. But I do think that the first selectman does play a role in this, and he's certainly familiar with both many of these nonprofits. He goes around town a lot, as well as Greenwich community. So I respect his decision.
Anybody else? Yes, Ms. Aurora.
Yeah, I think
Just a minute, I'll catch you. After Ms. Zora.
Thank you. No, I think this is, I kind of make this comment every year when this discussion comes up. You know, this is $1 million or so, and, you know, it gets pro rata across different nonprofits. Just want to remind the public that's listening in, this is post-tax money, right, that is now being directed to nonprofits. So it's always a little bit awkward that I find that, you know, we're asking taxpayers to fund nonprofits without getting that tax credit. And I personally support many of these nonprofits on here, so this is nothing against the individual nonprofits. But keeping that in mind, this overall grant kind of bothers me and how the essence of it, I think it should really be used for urban development. I think Ms. Jansen kind of also pointed this out. So I was surprised to see that, you know, Greenwich Communities, which is really the only nonprofit on here, which really is kind of and for those unfamiliar, this is the ex-Greenwich Housing Authority, right? This is the only organization that we have in our community that provides affordable housing to those that can't afford it. And we have, you know, roughly 1,000 homes that Greenwich Communities manages, and they don't take any town money. Really, most of their funding is provided by the federal government, the state, and from the state. The town really doesn't help subsidize all of that housing that exists in our community. So when I saw this on this community development block grant, irrespective of what they need it for, we have to remember these are the most vulnerable people in our community that Greenwich Communities is managing. So the idea that this committee didn't allocate a single dollar, I was kind of surprised. I don't really care what they needed it for, and I'll tell you, Alexis, this picture that you gave me wasn't really reassuring. I kind of looked at this and said, why are we not funding this project? So I don't know, I just wanted to provide a different perspective that, you know, I think this is a good change that the first selectman made, and I'm glad that Greenwich Communities is getting it. And the second point I'll make is some of these nonprofits that are asking for, and I don't know if the committee looks at this, have very large endowments that they should be looking to use before coming to really the taxpayer to request. So I have no problem. I support many of these nonprofits. I think they're great organizations. But the funding model for this particular grant really needs to kind of also think through the overall financials of these organizations. Some of them are very well funded. Some of them are kind of just getting off the ground, and some of them are somewhere in the middle. So I think some of that also needs to go into discussion when we give these. But I'll say I support the first selectman's changes. I think we need to make sure we continue to support Greenwich Communities, simply because they are really the only agency in our town that supports affordable housing.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes, thank you. As your community block grant rep, you know, I've been through this process over the last several months, and I echo what all of my colleagues have said about the importance of the work that they do, as well as the needs in our community. I would just say, though, that I support the motion made by Ms. Moriarty, and the reason for that is, as you know, we have 30-plus people or more who are involved in this work and have presented the allocations that they did unanimously, as was previously stated. You know, I would just say that, you know, if the first selectman is going to override those allocations, it would seem to me that it would be reasonable for the first selectman to supply a strong rationale and reasoning for that override. And I just don't see that happening here. You know, it's one thing to say the first selectman has the authority to do it. I don't necessarily dispute that. But I would think it's incumbent on the first selectman, if that is in fact what's going to happen, out of respect for the members who volunteer their time, all the work that's gone into the allocations, the reporting that's been done, you know, that a reason for the reallocation, a rationale would be presented even to us, you know, out of respect for what we're trying to do, which is approve these funding reallocations, would be provided so we could understand why it is that the first selectman at the end of the day is deciding to reallocate from safety projects to a maintenance project. It's not that these projects aren't important, but you need to make prioritizations. You need to have a basic understanding of how are you going to make these allocations, because there are limited funds, as you all know. And you have to have some mechanism for making determinations. And at least in my judgment, and I think in the judgment of the members of the task force, was that safety was going to be a priority. And I happen to have had the YMCA project allocated to me to review. And I went over to the YMCA and reviewed that project specifically. and reporting on it. And there is a strong safety need, as was previously spoken to by Ms. Bulgaris, and Ms. Moriarty also mentioned it. That intercom system is particularly important for that building. That building has significant deficiencies for line of sight. There's issues there in terms of being able to have lockdown and not having a mechanism to communicate. It's an old building, as many of you probably know. And I think it's important to also mention that the YWCA generator project is also a safety project. It might not seem that way at first review, but it is in fact a safety project. And it's also important to note that the A project was a $72 million ask that became a $72,000, if I remember right, $72,000 ask that became a $51,000 ask. That's now a $36,000 allocation. I think the YMCA was $200,000, if I'm remembering correctly, that became 50 and is now, I believe, 25, or if I have that right, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The point is that these are greatly diminished from what the original requests were and what the needs of these two are, and we're reallocating them to really what is a maintenance project. It's not that it's not an important project, but these other two projects from a prioritization seem very clear to me to be safety and great need, and even now are not sufficiently funding what's ultimately required in order to complete those projects. So I would urge you, my colleagues, I would urge you as the rep who has been through these meetings, who's read through these reports and authored the report of the YMCA in particular, to support the motion made by Ms. Moriarty and to return the funding back to the original amounts that were agreed to unanimously by the 30-something members of our community who volunteer significant time, energy, and effort to make these allocations for our review and approval. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Vasiliotis?
Okay, I think the key here is that these are recommendations of an advisory committee to and the first selectman then receives these recommendations. We often talk about the phrase, the buck stops here. Well, the first buck starts with the first selectman, who can accept or change the recommendations of the advisory committee. He chose to revise the recommendations, and we are now at the second buck, the BET, who can approve or reallocate the money, which this motion is requesting that we do. But what the first selectman has done here is not dissimilar to our budget process. The first selectman submits a recommended budget to the BET. The BET then looks over the budget. We accept some things, we reject some things, we modify some things, and then the budget goes to the RTM, who has the same ability to reduce or delete appropriations. Some are cut, some are not cut, and again, others remain the same. So I think that the discussion that we're having here is whether or not we accept what the first selectman has done. Some on this committee do not accept it and feel that the advice given to the first selectman by members of the CDBG committee, again, an advisory committee, be accepted without any change. For me, I'll be supporting the allocations as submitted by the first selectman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, the vote is on the motion by Ms. Moriarty, seconded by Mr. Selps, to revert to the advisory committee's recommendations. We'll start with Mr. Alfano.
No.
Mr. Cal.
I'm sorry, could you clarify what we're voting on again, please?
The motion is to revert to the advisory committee recommendations to reverse Mr. Camillo's change.
We're all tired.
I'll vote yes on that.
Ms. Jansen.
No.
Mr. Weisbrod.
I vote yes.
Ms. Moriarty.
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington.
No.
I'm a no. Ms. Vasiliotis.
No.
Mr. Selps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
No.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
Mr. Alchek.
Yes.
That's a 6-6 tie. So the motion fails. We're now going to vote on CD1 itself. I'll go in reverse order of Mr. Alchek.
I'm voting yes, that we are not, that we're not changing, sorry, we're,
It's as presented by the first selectman.
no, I'm voting no, that we're not, I'm voting against the first selectman's proposal.
Okay. Mr. Deschamps? Pass. Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Selps? Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Target?
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Kalb?
Yes.
Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher, I'll change my vote to yes, to make it a unanimous vote.
Okay, that makes it 12-0-0. Thank you all. We have a separate resolution for CDBG, which is a move as presented in the packet, the resolution in the amount of $723,939,
And I'll second that.
and it's seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Is there any discussion on this?
So shall I give the committee report?
The Budget Committee report, yes.
So the Budget Committee reviewed this resolution, the companion resolution to the CDBG entitlement grant appropriation. And at that point, it was a higher number. And so the committee approved this 4-0-0.
Any discussion on this?
Yeah, Tyler, on the further resolved on the second page, 1, 2, 3, 4 down, it says if the entitlement is less than the projected 723,939, is that supposed to be 778, 136, 32? I'm a little confused.
Yes, so.
Could you come up to the mic, please?
Because you also have it up on the first.
So the amount the town will be receiving from HUD is $723,939.
Okay,
The
got it.
total amount we'll be using is inclusive of the $54,197.32 that's already on hand from prior years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing and hearing none, this is approved 12-0-0. We have no committee liaison project team reports tonight, so,
Can I just make a quick one?
oh, of course.
I'm on the high school vestibule or entryway project. Just, I want to report that the Board of Education accepted the project as complete at its last meeting. We are in the final stages. There's still some punch list items, but getting all the invoices to make the final application to the state for the final reimbursement. The project is small enough that the audit is under this, the state.
Approve the amended bonding.
The State Department does the audit, so it'll be much
Well, that's
quicker than larger
Yes,
building
yes, yes.
committee audits.
All right, well, we'll take you. up right before
Congratulations.
that. Okay, thank you. So now we move to new business, setting of the mill rates. The first one to set is the general fund. I think it's appropriate to read out the resolution. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation hereby approves a tax at the rate of 12.041 mils on the dollar, and the same is hereby approved, levied, and laid against the assessment list of the town of Greenwich last completed as the tax for said town general fund for the succeeding fiscal year, to wit, for the fiscal year July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. Resolved that the chairman and clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall forthwith file a certificate of the levying and laying of such tax so approved by the Board of Estimate and Taxation with the town clerk, who shall record such a certificate in the town meeting record book, and the clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall obtain a receipt from the town clerk that this has been done. I'll move approval of that resolution.
I'll second that.
and Ms. Tarkington seconds. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
Mr. Weisbrod.
I was of the view that Mr. Minarski was going to share with us a view of where we are vis-à-vis the fund balance. I think there was a spreadsheet that had been discussed. I wasn't part of the discussion, but I thought actually you were going to hand out the spreadsheet and then take us through it.
Do you have the current version?
Lo and behold.
Okay,
Or use the podium, which we didn't have a trouble with.
Okay, I have reported over previous months that we're looking at a small deficit in the general fund. It has been as high as 3 million. It has been as low as 1.8 or 9 million.
Thanks.
It changes on a daily or weekly basis as the information comes in. Joan Lynch has done a lot of work on it, and as I said, it changes on a regular basis. As of this morning, we actually edited it. It's standing right now at a negative $2 million. Okay. What that means is that your audited fund balance from last year of 71.2 million will be reduced to $2 million to 69.165. Okay, we are only in May, month number 11. We have all of May, June, and 60 days to come up with a final number. What has been, I have been in contact with the business manager and the chief operating officer at the Board of Education. What has been reported to me in the last week or two is they're looking at a rather large surplus, anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million. That is not in this document. The reason it's not in this document is because they have indicated that they may take advantage of the state law and retain the surplus. You can retain up to 2% of budget, which this number is well below. So that number is not in there. So the surplus can potentially be break even. When you're looking at a $500 million budget, having a $1 or $2 million surplus or a $1 or $2 million deficit is basically break even. Okay, what you don't want to have is for example, is a $5 to $10 million surplus or a $5 to $10 million deficit. You could be accused of overtaxing or bad budgeting. Now, bad budgeting can be the result of economic or whatever. There could be a number of different factors. So to answer Mr. Weisbrod's answer, the fund balance, again, we're only in month number 11, is anywhere from break even, depending on what the Board of Education does, and up to $2 to $2.5 million. Let me point out that, and I think this is the reason you asked the question, is having a negative fund balance in a year does not indicate that you are in financial trouble, okay? What you have to be aware of in the case of a negative fund balance is you don't want to set a trend, okay? We have, for many years, used fund balance. We were down as low as 11 million, and we went up as far as 15, 20, 23, et cetera. Last year, for June 30th, 2024, we used 23 and change. With the interim appropriations, we basically used up to $27 million of fund balance, which produced the negative fund balance that, I'm sorry, which impacted the surplus deficit. So for the current year, the projection, as I stated, is anywhere from zero break even to 2 or 3 million, but we do have a trend. if you're going to use $23.8 million, you should expect that you are going to have a deficit. When I say trend and where we went down dramatically is the revenues are starting to trend downward. So what you have to be aware of looking forward is you don't want the trend to continue. As I said, 1 year is not bad, okay? The year before, we were plus 2 million. We could be negative $2 million. But you have to be aware that in the future, and I say the next year, I can't predict 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years, we have an alarming trend in where the revenues are being reduced. If you continue to use the fund balance in the future and the revenues continue to erode or reduce, and then you have a trend, then you are in a negative position that I would not like to be in. I know there's a lot out there, and I hedge a lot because you're asking me to try to predict a fund balance, and there's too many moving parts at this point.
No, I think you did it, as always, an exemplary job answering the question. But I believe the 2 million or 1.5 million surplus at the Board of Ed is already pretty much committed for an unexpected vendor issue vis-a-vis bus contracts, not related to start time. Is that your understanding?
I don't know that.
Oh.
I don't know if they're going to exercise, take advantage of the state law and reserve that 2 million. To your point, I just became aware of that there's a $2 million issue with the bus contract next year.
And same with me. I just became aware of it literally in the last 24 hours. So the point I guess I would ask, if it's the case, and if therefore we then would have a $2 million use of fund balance, which I can't recall a year since I've been on this board when we have depleted the fund balance. I could be wrong. And I hear your message, which is 1 year doesn't create an issue. But the expectation I would have is that in the future year, especially in light of some of the, op-eds that are going back and forth about adding to the school budget and the willingness I'm hearing to add to the school budget, the question is, if we don't address that issue now in terms of the mill rate, won't we likely add to the negative balance and start creating a trend if we make that decision in the next fiscal year? Question for you.
Again, 1 year, you're basically at break even if you're plus 2 million or negative $2 million. And I'll repeat it, is that, and I know that what you're going for is you're looking for a $2 million solution here. In order to resolve that $2 million solution, you'd have to raise taxes. That's where you're looking, correct?
Well, no, I guess I'll just make the point and I would turn to my colleagues, Mr. Fisher and others, who have made very constructive recommendations to add to the school budget. One responsible way to do that, it seems to me, would be to make the decision at this meeting to add 2 million to the fund balance by increasing the mill rate a tad this year, so that we have the wherewithal to allocate those funds when it comes time to do so. I mean, in other words, if there are op-eds, whether the Democrats made op-eds or the Republicans made op-eds, everybody is saying, let's put up a couple of $1 million more. Well, if that's the case, then I think the time to demonstrate that is now by adjusting the fund balance number, which is already negative and will likely be negative in another year, but to responsibly increase the mill rate a tad, adding a couple of million to the fund balance so that we have the resources to do the things that we've all said we would like to do in the various op-eds. I would turn this to my Republican colleagues to see if they're willing to make that decision.
And just if I could just finally try to answer and comment. I'm going to defer to answer that question to the 12 of you. But keep in mind that you do have a policy. You have a fund, BET has a fund balance policy where you have a target of 8 to 12, 15%. So you can look at it a couple of ways. With this fund balance ratio, you're at 14.7%. You're at the high end, okay? You could look at it either way. You could agree with your argument, or someone could also say that we can afford to reduce the 14.7 down to a lower number. So there's a pro and con to your question as far as answering it. And again, I'm going to defer to the 12 of you on how you're going to vote.
No, I think it is a decision for the 12 of us.
Yeah.
I would only say, though, that it's pretty apparent that if we don't do this, if we don't increase the fund balance today, it's quite likely, if not almost certain, that we'll have another dip in the fund balance in the prospective year. So there you start getting into the area of a trend. And I think that's what we want to avoid. I get it. 1 year a trend does not make, but the likelihood of it becoming a trend next year is staring us in the face. So I think the conservative, fiscally conservative thing is to anticipate that so that we avoid that crisis in the prospective year and put away that money now so that it's on hand. That's a decision, as you say, the 12 of us need to make.
I would just like to correct Mr. Weisbrod. I have not advocated for adding money to the school budget on BET decision day, Friday. I tried to negotiate a compromise with your side of the aisle at a $2 million reduction versus $4 million. And your excuse me, Mr. Weisbrod, and your $1 million position, and that compromise was rejected by your side.
That's not factually correct, but I wasn't even referring to you. I was referring to Mr. Alfano, Ms. Aurora, and Ms. Jansen.
I'm sorry, but you mentioned my name.
I didn't mean to, because I just said that it was offered by 3 others, and so I don't mention your, if you don't want to make that's up to you, but 3 of your colleagues did make that public offer.
Ms. Tarkington, then Mr. Kalb, then Ms. Faciotis.
So, Pete, I just want to clarify for all of us present that, in terms of schools, while it's, your conversations are that they could be returning up to $2 million, you basically have them spending their full budget here, and so that $2 million has already been removed. If it wasn't removed, this fund balance would be more or less just flat. It would not be negative.
I thought I said that.
Yeah, well, I know, but I just think it needed clarification because it sounded to me like Mr. Weisbrod was a bit confused. Now, my other,
Mr. Weisbrod was not confused. I resent that, and please retract that. I'm not confused one bit.
May I ask you a question, please? On the government, allowing the Board of Education to keep the 2%, can that just be exercised, or does that particular state statute, whatever it is, need to be incorporated in the town's ordinances or, something like that? Or can it just be exercised? Or do we need our legislative body to do something in order to accept that?
It's my understanding they have the option to exercise that state statute and reserve those monies, and that the power to spend would be taken away from you, the BET, and the BOE would have the discretion to spend that $1.5 to $2 million. And again, the 2% is a larger number. They could only reserve the surplus portion. And I've been told within the last week that it's anywhere from 1.5 to 2. So to answer your question, it's a state statute that they have the option of exercising.
So, my reaction to this is that it lacks transparency, because once they do that, they can just spend the money without coming back to the BET, and that is very precedent setting, especially for a sum like $2 million, especially when our charter doesn't allow something to be done for, say, the RTM at $5,000, and this is some $1.5 to $2 million. That one part of it really concerns me.
Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Before we start talking about or drilling down on BOE spending and what we want to do with, interim appropriations and everything else and reserving money, I want to drill down a little bit more on your comments, because there's a few things that I have questions about. One was, for example, you've mentioned several times what you don't want to do is establish a trend. Now, you're not, it was very clear, you're not opining that we are establishing a trend. But what you're saying is you don't want to have a negative trend. And what you didn't talk about were the consequences. Can you talk for a little bit about what are the consequences if we do have a persistent or a deficit trend? What happens in that case?
Okay, each year when I do the credit reviews with Moody's and S&P, and we used to do Fitch, they would always ask me, where are you? Where are you gonna end up at June 30th? And at that time this year, I said break even, okay? Since then, one of the trends that occur is the revenues have trended downward, okay? And we can give you an analysis on a line by line where they did specifically in all the areas. When I say a trend in and you asked about the consequences, let's say that hypothetically we end up with $2 million deficit, and
Continue.
When everything
right.
is over, the audit's over for June 30, 25, and let's say it's January and the credit rating agencies are looking at the review, and they said, okay, you went from $71.2 million down to about $69 million, and you lost $2 million. Where are you this year, meaning June 30th of 26? Now, if you say that, if the town says that they're going to lose 1, 2, or 3 million,
Again,
that's
right.
that's the trend I'm referring to.
And
Now, the consequences is that you can quickly resolve something like that by raising taxes, okay, and bring it back down. You could, and the way you do that is you reduce fund balance, okay. You're not going to risk the AAA with 2 negative years. However, and I don't have the experience to work in a AAA where you have a 3rd year or a 4th year. So I can't opine and say that the consequences are you're going to lose the AAA. They're remote, okay? And I don't know what BET members are going to be here next January or 2 Januaries after that, whatever. But I've got to bet everything that the BET is going to step up. When they look at the credit reviews and they issue the reports and they say, this is where you're heading, and they're going to resolve that issue. So the consequences I think you're searching for are not going to be a loss of a AAA.
no, I just wanted to know. So it seems like what you're saying is, if we have a deficit this year and then coming to next year, it looks like you might have a deficit again. Well, you're getting a little uncomfortable, but if it happened again, then you start to put your AAA rating potentially at risk.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
what happens.
You-
And you can cure it, but that's what you're saying is
Exactly what I'm saying is that you're going to be forewarned. You're going to know by next February or March. You're going to get, the BOE is going to transmit to the first selectman. The first selectman is going to transmit to you. You're going to have your public hearings in January. At least by February, you're going to know where you're trending. That is easy to resolve through reducing the use of fund balance, which is raising taxes.
And our fund balance today with the $2 million, if there's a $2 million deficit, you said as a percentage, you were talking about as a percentage, we're still at the high end of the range of what it should be, general fund balance?
Between 14 and 15%, the ratio.
So we're at 14, 15, and what is the ratio, the minimum, and what's the range? The recommended range?
The target range is
8
8% to 15%.
8 to 15. So even with the 2 million deficit, we're still at the high end of the range. Is that
Correct.
right? So why then, if we're at the high end of the range, why then is your credit rating potentially at risk, even if you went down another year?
I don't think that we'll ever be at risk. What I'm saying is that you'll be forewarned in January, February, March, how you're trending, and I have confidence that the BET that is sitting here after January will address it.
Right. So if it starts to go down below, I don't know, you're at 14, if it goes down to 12, it goes down to 10, that's when the credit rating agencies start to look at you sideways a little bit? I mean, what's the, or is it just simply the declining trend that's upsetting to them?
As I stated before, they'll ask you each January, how you doing, meaning how, till project down to June 30th. If, for example, you have a negative 2 million this year, and if you're projecting to go 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the negative is, they're going to ask you, what are you going to do about it? And then someone has to provide an answer about what are you going to do about it. The simple answer is that we're going to reduce the use of fund balance, which translates to a raise in taxes. However, I can't predict the future. If, for example, that say it's flat hypothetically, you have a -2, then it's projected to be flat, they're going to let you go. When I use the word trend, I mean a negative trend, and it's got to be substantive. It just, I can't, even if you had $2 million deficits, the trend would have to go into the third year.
Right.
And I have total confidence that the next BET is going to address it. I don't mean that negatively against this BET.
No, you're saying it's on your watch. It's on their watch.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through an 18-month period as far as what's going to happen in the future.
And I guess the other question I had is, what happens, how does an assessment, on property values, never mind mill rate, but assessment, how does that impact the revenue calculation here? You have any idea?
The revenue calculation?
Yes.
Okay, one of the things that Roland does is we do somewhat of a pro forma where we ignore the fact that we do that still with the, we ignore the fact that there's a reval and we show them how it will look without the reval. You need the microphone.
Reval, the assessor kind of works against the old numbers.
You got to turn your mic on there.
Yeah, the assessor still works with the old numbers and says, without the reval, it would be
X. And with the reval?
Reval, it's Y, yeah.
Okay.
Traditionally revals, your assessments go up and your mill rate goes down. However, what you can't see is the unfairness, okay? And I live in Chickahominy, and I was impacted differently than someone that lives maybe in the northern part of it.
Yeah.
So what you have is, and I've gotten these calls over the year. One year, there was a front page article where it said, average taxes will go up 11%, or whatever the number was, or something like that. And somebody who was severely impacted by it, I was on the phone for an hour and couldn't convince him that that was an average, okay? And I can't recall what part of the town it is. But basically, Roland answered the impact on average. But, and again, this is a Lauren question is, I don't know how the shore is going to do versus the Chickahominy versus the Old Greenwich versus the North Country, residential versus the commercial. You can throw in, there's changes in the car taxes and business taxes, but basically throughout the state, your reval is going to go up and your mill rate's going to go down, and you're individually impacted depending on where you live in town.
So overall, it's not, because your main point was, you said, we're facing a deficit because revenues are going down. That's what you said.
That's not tax revenues.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually,
It's total revenue.
yeah, but just to qualify that, One of the things that we did, did occur, and there was a number of items that impacted. It wasn't just one revenue. We had about 1.7 in court stipulations. We had, what was a little bit unusual this year was in court stips, you all know, you get it from Lauren all the time, is you could have court stips in year one. Sometimes you don't see the court, when I say court stips, I mean court stipulations is when somebody sues the town because they were unfairly assessed. You might not see that until year 2, 3, or 4. In this case here, in this model before you, we were impacted negatively with court stips, which were way above $1 million more than there normally are each year. But then there's probably 10 factors in here, all in the revenue area, that impacted this negative number. And I want to stress that when you have a $500 million budget, and you're only short $2 million, you've basically broke even, okay? It's the same thing with a $2 million. There's so many variables that go in there that you've got to put everything together to really analyze and figure out how you came up with $2 million. That's not bad budgeting. When you have $500 million budget and you missed it by 0.5%, you're doing okay.
Yep, all right, thank you.
Ms. Vasiliotis.
Yeah, Pete, do we have to create a non-lapsing account for what's required by the BOE's new law, state law?
I don't know what we're supposed to do. This is new to me. Ever since I found out in the last week, I've read the state law. My staff and I have talked about it. We don't even know what the word budget means, okay? There's 169 municipalities. We're unique. The Board of Education does not have health care.
Right.
It does not have the defined benefit contribution, the defined contribution. It does not have workers' compensation. It does not have insurances, does not have debt service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't even know what the word budget means as far as trying to interpretate or apply the state law as far as a reservation of surplus. Do you follow what I'm saying?
No, I get it, I get it.
Okay.
I also think what I heard loud and clear is that our department heads are going to need to manage their budgets next year and not come in for many interims, to further deplete. I also just wanted to remind this body that Section 23 of the Charter says that the appropriations fixed by the RTM become the appropriations for the town for the next fiscal year. And that Section 288 of the town charter says that the BET has to determine the tax rate on or before May 25th of each year, and the rate shall yield in cash taxes sufficient with the other estimated revenue receipts of the town to meet the appropriations of the town for the succeeding fiscal year. So the BET has to determine the tax or mill rate that will meet the appropriations that were set by the RTM for fiscal year 26, according to our charter.
Any other discussion? Ms. Moriarty.
Yeah, and to do that, the way that we have our funding, we balance our budget using use of fund balance, a reserve amount. So that's the item that we're talking about. And I just think it's important for this board to understand where we stand with fund balance, which Pete's done a great job of just explaining that, and to talk about the risks, right? We want to know a little bit about pros and cons, because while that $2 million may be a small percentage, it's the first time it's been negative in ever, since we've had a fund balance.
No, since we had a fund balance.
Since we had a fund balance. So I think, that's something that for our board to take into account. I think Ms. Vasiliotis just mentioned we had a very low level of interim appropriations this year. And granted, in the past few years, the interims have really been a function of, and this is just operating interims, because that gets funded directly from fund balance, overtime, extra overtime really in our police and fire departments, and then the underfunding of special education services, which it sounds like we've caught up on that. So we had a couple years, we were at 3 million a year of interims. It was 350 last year, and it was a much lower level before that point in time. But there's a risk, right? If that low level is unusually low, and it's not a managed of departments doing a better job of managing their budgets. I think they do an excellent job of managing their budget, but there are unforeseen circumstances which occur, which we need to be prepared for, and that's what this is. We also know our risk fund for settlements is going to be virtually wiped out this year, so we'll be going to the general fund for any legal settlements that we need. There's potential budget risk, and I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about what the risks and opportunities are. There's probably some positive things to look at too. But this issue of the Board of Ed transportation number, the potential increase of the Board of Ed budget, if that's a serious issue that's being identified, that could be a $4 million, a $2 million if you exclude the Board of Ed's current status, or $4 million if you include the fact that they have some excess funds currently in their operating budget allocation for this year. So those are some of the negatives. The positives probably are that we think the amount of funding for Nathaniel Witherell next year will drop by probably about $1 million. So that's a positive number, $1 million. There's an issue with the DPW grants. We haven't received grants this year. We have 1.8 million in the budget for next year. But what I'm thinking about is the revenue forecast we have for this year is probably similar to a budgeted revenue forecast we have for next year. And if we underran that revenue forecast, because we budget that conservatively, because we want to use those excess funds to offset this $23.8 million we use to balance the budget, we're going to underrun that next year if there's a constant run rate. So I think that there are some real risks that, to me, work out that we are going to end up using more fund balance next year, and it's going to come at a time where we have one of our larger contract labor groups signing a new labor contract, and it's a higher inflation environment right now. There are just some financial risks that just as a board we should be aware of and be discussing and figure out whether we do need to potentially put more funds in our fund balance than our current mill rate chart represents here. And I just wanted to open up a discussion on that.
Ms. Tarkington.
So, we can be a bit more positive too, because Pete has warned us over the last, 6 months, 9 months, maybe longer, about the risks of overusing fund balance. So when we did, whether it was guidelines or later in the budget, we didn't increase the use of fund balance at that point in time. But I'd also like to say that we have very substantial budgets for conveyance tax, building permits, and interest. And I would say that those budgets were greater than any, and very substantially more than any year other than the last fiscal year 24. And yet, right now, we're only $36,000 off of meeting our annual budget for all of those, with 2 more months to be added to those numbers. And as anyone knows, I've been very concerned about bridge revenues. I always called it the bridge report, but now we're actually getting some very good work on that front in the DPW. And, based on that, I would guess we're probably somewhere maybe around even, depending on, for this year, in our budget. Maybe there's another issue here, but might be off, I'm not sure. But also, we're very substantially below next year in terms of what we budgeted and what the DPW is saying we could receive. So there are other opportunities here if we all work together and be prudent and cautious. I think Nathaniel Witherell, I'd like to say it's $2 million savings we'll have next year. So there are other things here that balance out, and that's what being on the Budget Committee and being on the BET is all about, making these decisions wisely, that we deliver all the services that people want, and that we, people can pay for them, and our, all of our populations get basically what they want. And I think we worked hard to achieve that. But Pete, you've been very constructive in terms of helping us transition from the pay-as-you-go environment to, a fund balance, which you've just pointed out is almost 15% of our budget, which is at the top of our range. So thank you, Pete, for all the help you've given us.
Ms. Fasciotis.
Yeah, I would just like to echo and thank Pete and everyone for a nice conversation about the global picture, but I am going to then ask that we move the question.
Ms. Aurora.
I'm sorry, I've had my hand up for a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay. I wanted to actually talk after my colleague, Mr. Kalb, was speaking, when I was kind of thinking the exact same when we were trying to figure out, kind of where are we, what's the current percentage? I guess he's my investment colleague, so we probably think alike. So I did look at what the fund balance has been for the past decade in our town. I just want to share that. 2015, 25 million, 2016, 25 million, 2017, 34 million, 2018, 42 million, 2019, 42 million, 2020, 41 million, 21, 48 million, 22, 38 million, 23, 72 million, 24, 72.8, and 20, kind of where we are today. And the reason I want to provide that is over the last decade, the average fund balance has been around 44, 45 million. The range per our BET guideline, and I'll just read right from there, the target range for the town's fund balance as a percentage of total expenses is 8 to 15%. And over the last decade, we've been, effectively in the 6 to 15% range, 6 to 14% range. We're at the upper end of that today. During that entire period, probably going further back, we've been AAA. This is nothing to do with our rating, whether we are at 70, 68, 40, 50, whatever, that, nothing to do with that. And I know, Pete, I think, I understand the concern of the trend downwards, but I think it's also important to recognize trends are not made after 1 or 2 years, and trends are also mean reverting. Mean reverting in this case would be 40, 50, that will be when you see a trend. So I think it is really important to recognize that, no, we should not be advocating for a tax increase, effectively using our fund, decreasing our fund balance, really just to get to a number. Second point I want to make is this idea of negative fund balance. I think, Pete, the way you look at that is year on year, right? So last year we were at X, this year we're at X minus 2 million, therefore we're at a deficit. But when we're at the upper end of the range, we really have nowhere else to go but down, right? So we're at the 8 to 15% range. So if we're at 70 million and the next year we're at 68 million, that doesn't mean that we are in a deficit, right? So the idea really of, it's really how you frame the discussion. I would look at this as, and I understand we are -2 from last year, but if we're at 69 million, we're still significantly over the mean over the last decade, which is around 45 million fund balance. And the third point I'll make is that, even if we as a board decided we did want to shore up our fund balance, we want to make it, as a conservative, we like the idea of, having a bigger fund, bigger rainy day fund, so to speak. That's really what this is. The time to do it is not in an inflationary environment, which is where we are today, right? The idea that when we're already at close to 3%, that we're going to tax our community, the idea that we're going to use this opportunity when we're at the highest range of our fund balance to say, well, we're going to tax our community even more to shore up the fund balance doesn't really make, honestly, much sense. So this is addressing Mr. Weisbart's initial comment of where are my Republican colleagues, and I think he mentioned me by name, when, should we, so to be very clear, should we increase taxes on our community to shore up a fund balance that's already at the upper end? The answer is no, and I don't understand why anyone on this board would even argue anything but that. So I guess I'll end with that.
And I'm going to move the question.
One more point.
Can I make a point?
The question's been called. There's been an awful lot of discussion. Is there something really?
I'll be brief.
Well, Mr. Alcheck goes first.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I want to second what my colleague, Ms. Aurora, has mentioned just a moment ago. But I want to just maybe put it in a slightly, look at it from a slightly different point of view. The rating agencies, and I've worked with municipal rating agencies extensively over the years, they look at this ratio, as you've pointed out, Pete. They look at what is our fund balance, cash, as a proportion of our overall budget, of our expenditures. And you would expect that our fund balances would rise over time, just as Mrs. Aurora has pointed out. That's the expectation. So from here, if our fund balance were to stay the same, that's a bad thing because the ratio is declining. Now, as you've pointed out, we're at the high end of that range, and that's a good thing. And in any given year, we have the flexibility, as you pointed out, a couple million up one year, a couple million down the next year. That's fine. But as a trend over time, everyone on this board should understand that we should be expecting our fund balance to rise in proportion to the amount of our budget. And so if we draw it down by 2 million, that's fine. By 4 million, that may be a bit extreme. And we've got to look at that and we think about that years in advance. So I think it'd be incorrect to think that, well, just drawing it down 2 million for the next fiscal year might be fine, but going beyond that might not be fine. Or thinking that we're going to get away with that more than 1 year, also, I think I would be very cautionary about that.
Mr. Weisbrod, do you have something new to add?
Yes. Public suggestions, proposals have been made to add 2 million or so back to the school budget. Now, if it's the case that people don't want to increase taxes, so it's got to be paid for. I mean,
It's not on the agenda, Mr. Weisbrod.
No, we're talking about fund balance. And I'll be brief. If you don't want to tax for that, the only other way to do it is to further draw down the fund balances. Now, what I think is going to really happen in practice, just so that the public who's listening in understands this, you could do that potentially. Then you would create a trend. You'd have not only this year with the prospective year, this year with a 2 million deficit, you're likely, almost certainly going to have another year with a 2 million deficit. So the public should be aware that would create an environment where it will be extremely tight in terms of any budget proposals to do anything in the town, because now you have an imminent trend. So if you want to really, invest in the town for any reason, it's going to be that much more difficult. Now, I'm not saying we should necessarily, but as we all know, we're living in an inflationary environment. So all I'm really saying is if the answer is no, we don't want to address it now with an increase in the mill rate, fine. But then the answer is, if you're serious about adding 2 million back to the schools, you're really saying, we'll take it from the fund balance and start creating a trend where we really, draw from that negatively. That's my comment.
Harry, I'd like to respond to both Mr. Alcheck and Mr. Weisbrod.
All right,
So-
this is going to be the last speaker,
Okay,
please.
that's fine. I gave the absolute dollar numbers of the fund balance, but I also gave the ratio, so I understand this is a ratio discussion. The fund balance over the last decade has been between 16 and 15, where we are today. 6% is actually below our target fund balance, and even then we were a AAA. So I do want to point out, Mr. Alcheck, I did also look at the ratio. As far as Mr. Weisbrod's comment, I believe we're looking at different numbers. Like I just mentioned, our average fund balance for the last decade has been $45 million. We are at 69. So again, the framing of negative fund balance is because it's year on year. If you look at it actually where we are from the average, we are significantly over the mean. And if whether or not we do a 2 million future interim or future to draw from the fund balance does not make, I would say, no, do not tax. Do not increase your taxes now to, again, shore up a fund balance that is at the upper end. And I would request Mr. Weisbrod to actually listen to what I am saying. The average over the last decade is 45. We are at 69, which is significantly higher than the mean fund balance.
Okay, the question has been called. I'm going to call for a record vote on a tax rate for the general fund of 12.041 mils per thousand on the dollar. Mr. Alfano,
Yes.
Mr. Kalb,
Yes.
Ms. Jansen,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis.
Yes.
Mr. Selps,
Yes.
Ms. Aurora,
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps,
Yes.
Mr. Alchek.
Yes, that was a lot of discussion for a 12-0 vote.
You know, I think it was good to share that information because we'll need it next year.
Okay, we're
I
going to move
agree.
on to the following resolution for the Sewer Improvement Fund, which I'll move this resolution. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation hereby approves a tax at the rate of 0.278 mils on the dollar, and that the same is hereby approved, levied, and laid upon the assessment list of the town of Greenwich last completed as the tax for said town's sewer maintenance fund for the succeeding fiscal year, to wit, for the fiscal year July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. Resolved that the chairman and clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall forthwith file a certificate of the levying and laying of such tax so approved by the Board of Estimate and Taxation with the town clerk, who shall record such certificate in the town meeting record book, and the clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall obtain a receipt from the town clerk that this has been done. Could I have a second, please? Seconded by Ms. Tarkington. For the sewer fund, moved by myself. Is there any discussion?
It's a sewer maintenance fund, right?
Sewer maintenance fund. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. I'm going to do a record vote again, please. Mr. Alfano,
Yes.
Mr. Kalb,
Yes.
Ms. Jansen.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis.
Yes.
Mr. Selps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
And Mr. Alchek.
Yes.
12-0-0. Thank you. We move on to the Sewer Improvement Fund. I'll move the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation hereby approves a tax at the rate of 0.040 mils on the dollar, and the same is hereby approved, levied, and laid upon the assessment list of the town of Greenwich last completed as the tax for said town's sewer improvement fund for the succeeding fiscal year, to wit, for the fiscal year July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. Resolved that the chairman and clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall forthwith file the certificate of the levying and laying of such tax so approved by the Board of Estimate and Taxation with the town clerk, who shall record such certificate in the town meeting record book, and the clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall obtain a receipt from the town clerk that this has been done. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for the Sewer Improvement Fund. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Alchek.
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps.
Yes.
Ms. Aurora.
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
Yes.
Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Tarkington?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Kalb?
Yes.
And Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Terrific. So we'll now go back to our agenda.
The bonding resolution.
Yeah, do you want to do yours first? Yeah, we're going to take up the item that was added at the beginning to approve the resolutions, the Scribner changes that were made by the RTM.
Yes, hold on, I just got to call them up again. On my phone. Okay, the RTM actually approved the main resolutions with some corrections of Scribner errors. And these are found, hold on one second, I'm just trying to find them. Okay, on grants and other receipts, the police department, there was a change to include an and before the sub 2 and sub 3, and to make state a small s rather than a large s. That's in grants and other receipts, police department, subparagraph E. And then in subparagraph F of the same, in the police, there was a change in the third line to say, and describing, deleting shall describe and provide a description, and the was deleted, and just adding the word describing. The health department, number 40, the in front of environmental protection was deleted. And that's all I seem to have here. And the others were just, yeah, Scribner's errors. So I'm just going to make a motion that we approve the RTM approved resolutions with the Scribner's errors corrected.
Mr. Self seconds. Ms. Vasiliotis moves to accept the RTM changes to the main resolution. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing and hearing none, that's 12-0-0. Okay, now we come to the approval of an amended bonding resolution by the RTM. This changed the amount of the bonding resolution to reflect the reductions to the Hamilton Avenue HVAC and the West Brothers Brook. I don't happen to have that number in front of me, but
It's 27,692,000 is the new number.
thank you.
And I'll second your motion.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve that bonding. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing and hearing none?
I think you need to do a record vote.
Oh, I need to do a record vote on this, all right. Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Mr. Kalb?
Yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod?
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty?
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
Yes.
Ms. Aurora?
Yes.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
Mr. Olczak?
Yes.
Okay. So we now move to the appointment of the comptroller. It's a resolution that's been passed out to everybody. Do I have to- Okay. I'll move this resolution. Resolve that the Board of Estimate and Taxation appoints Joan Lynch as the comptroller effective July 1, 2025, and terminating on the date of the organizational meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation in January 2026. The appointment shall be subject to the provisions of Article 1, Section 11 of the Town Charter. The comptroller's salary will be initially set at $230,000.
second that.
I second that.
I'll take Leslie Tarkington. Is there any discussion? Ms. Tarkington?
So I'd just like to point out here that while it says that it's until January 2026, that our employees also are MC employees, and, you know, this is a old charter section, and we expect that good employees continue after the date.
Of course. Any other discussion? Mr. Alfano?
When is your last day, Peter?
June 30th.
Thank you for your service.
Okay, I believe we probably ought to take a record vote on this. Mr. Alfano?
Yes.
Mr. Cowell?
Enthusiastic, yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Weisrod?
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty?
Also happy to vote yes.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Vasiliotis?
Yes.
Mr. Selps?
It gives me great pleasure to vote yes.
Ms. Aurora?
Yes, and welcome, Joan.
Mr. Deschamps?
Yes.
And Mr. Olchek?
Absolutely, and congratulations.
Thank you, Joan. We look forward to your service, and Pete, we know you're not going far. Okay.
You know where you live.
Yeah, right. Next on the, is approval of the BET committee meeting minutes of April 14th, the regular meeting, April 1st, 3rd, and 4th being decision day 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Is there any objection to taking these as a group? Okay, I'll move approval of the minutes of April 14th, 2025, April 1st, 2025, April 3rd, 2025, and April 4th, 2025.
And I'll second.
And Ms. Moriarty seconds. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing and hearing none, the minutes are all approved. Hadn't really thought about a chair report, but I want to thank everybody for a very thoughtful meeting. And we've gotten through budget season, and we'll move on to other business. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Alfano moves. I'll second it. All in favor, aye.
This is the last time you're doing that, or one more time?